Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Parallel Deku. Back with another fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Rebuilt Himself into a Hero? Now before starting, please give this video a like. And subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. You would think that if your mother was the number 11 pro hero and your stepdad the number 1 hero, both in the eyes of the public and in your own, you would have a relatively comfortable and comforting life. However, that was not the case for Izuku Midoriya, especially since he was quirkless. This was a lesson he learned on a fateful day. In a waiting room, Izuku Midoriya sat in casual clothes with her 2 children beside her. On one side was her 4-year-old son, Izuku, and on the other was his younger sister, Izumi Yagi, who had bright yellow hair and green eyes. The 2 children were happily discussing what quirks they might have, their bond as siblings evident in their excitement. Suddenly, the secretary approached Inko and called her name. The doctor was ready to see them. Inko gathered her children, and they followed her into the doctor's office. Once seated, the doctor addressed Inko with a serious expression. He informed her that he had both good news and bad news, asking which she wanted to hear first. Inko, feeling a wave of anxiety, chose to hear the bad news first. The doctor delivered the news that Izuku did not have a quirk and likely never would, which left Izuku stunned, his expression one of disbelief. Inko felt a deep sadness wash over her, while Izumi looked at her brother with concern, wondering if they would still be able to pursue their dreams of becoming heroes together. The doctor then shared the good news. Izumi had a strong electrokinetic quirk, one of the most powerful types. Izumi's face lit up with joy, and Inko couldn't help but smile as she lifted her daughter in celebration. Izumi declared her ambition to be the best hero, but Izuku, watching from the sidelines, felt tears welling in his eyes. Later that night, Inko sat on the couch with Izumi asleep on her lap, gently brushing her hair. The door opened, and Tashinori, also known as All Might, entered, looking deflated. Inko greeted him warmly, and after a kiss, she shared the news from the doctor. While she expressed concern about Izuku's lack of a quirk, she was excited about Izumi's potential. Meanwhile, Izuku remained hidden in the shadows, his eyes red from crying, feeling increasingly isolated. At school, Izuku faced rejection from his peers, who quickly labeled him as the quirkless kid. The situation worsened when Izumi stopped talking to him altogether, leaving him feeling utterly alone. One day, while sitting on a playground bench and eating a sandwich, he was approached by Izumi, Bakugo, and the Todoroki twins. Izumi asked if he wanted to be a hero, and Izuku's heart soared at her words. However, Bakugo's explosive reaction sent Izuku tumbling off the bench, landing hard on the ground. Izumi warned him to stop dreaming about being a hero, and then she activated her quirk, energy crackling around her. Bakugo and Shoto joined in, showcasing their powers, while Shota stood back, watching quietly. Izumi insisted it was for his own good, but as time went on, Izuku found himself living as an outcast, even within his own home. His parents focused on training Izumi to become the next symbol of peace, leaving Izuku feeling neglected and unimportant. He was unaware that Tashinori Yagi was All Might, and to him, it seemed like his family had abandoned him due to his lack of a quirk. Izuku spent his time studying as he felt he had no other options. He couldn't exercise much since the training facility was often occupied by Izumi or his parents, who wouldn't let him go anywhere alone. Izumi's group, which included Bakugo and the Todoroki twins, became increasingly hostile toward him. Initially, their teasing was limited to hero-related topics, but it soon escalated, and Izuku found himself becoming their target for bullying. His parents, either oblivious or dismissive of his bruises, attributed them to rough play with friends, leaving Izuku feeling more isolated than ever. This abandonment left Izuku with no other choice but to study to keep his mind occupied, leading to the development of a brilliant mind. His situation did not improve much. Although the harassment became less intense as they grew older, it continued for 10 years until the end of middle school. The middle school teacher stood in front of the students and addressed them, expressing a lack of interest in giving them a career assessment, knowing they all aspired to be heroes. All Might repeatedly tried to wake Izuku, who seemed to have lost consciousness. In a moment of desperation, All Might hugged the unconscious Izuku, filled with regret, vowing that he would not let him die that day. He stood up, carrying Izuku, and rushed as fast as he could to the nearby hospital. Meanwhile, Izumi walked home with her head lowered, feeling alone. She used to walk with Izuku, even if they didn't talk, but today she didn't want to see her brother. She thought to herself, frustrated with him for not understanding that he shouldn't be a hero, fearing he would only get himself killed. Despite everything, Izumi still held a special place in her heart for Izuku and remembered when it all began. A few days after Izuku's diagnosis, she watched a program called The Life of the Heroes, which showcased the true hardships heroes faced. The intense battles she witnessed were disturbing to her, especially at her young age. Although scared at the idea of death, she resolved that nothing would stop her from becoming the greatest hero alongside her brother. Then a troubling thought crossed her mind. Her brother didn't have a quirk to fight. She realized that if powerful heroes could fall to a single villain, what would happen to Izuku? As images of battles flashed on the screen, horror washed over her. The next day, Izumi met with her friends, Bakugo and the Todorokis, to share her concerns. She expressed her fear of losing her brother, and they all agreed that they wanted to protect him. Bakugo suggested that they use their quirks on Izuku to instill fear of them, preventing him from pursuing a hero's path. Though hesitant, Izumi reluctantly agreed, and thus began a series of misguided actions driven by a noble yet foolish idea. As she walked, memories of her actions flooded back to her, and she stopped, covering her mouth as tears began to form in her eyes. She realized the gravity of what she had done and felt like a fool. After a few moments, she managed to calm herself down, resolving to make things right. Izumi rushed home, calling out to her mother upon arrival. Inko greeted her warmly, and Izumi went to her room to change and grab her phone. Joined her mother in the living room, where Inko was watching TV. When asked about Izuku, Izumi looked down, admitting they had a disagreement and took different routes home. Inko encouraged her to get along with her brother, and Izumi promised to apologize when she saw him. After texting her best friend Shota about her thoughts and desire to apologize, she received supportive responses from her friends. Now, all she could do was wait for Izuku to return home. Meanwhile, Inko reflected on her memories of Izuku growing up, realizing she had been focusing more on Izumi. She recalled how Izuku had become independent, studying on his own and spending hours alone in his room. Initially, she thought it was a sign of maturity, but now she wondered if it was because she hadn't been paying enough attention. With a heavy sigh, she resolved to make things right. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Inko opened it to find Naomasa standing there, and Izumi felt a chill run down her spine. At the Musudafa hospital, Inko walked through the halls with tears in her eyes, and Izumi, equally distressed, followed closely behind. They reached a surgery room where All Might was waiting. Upon seeing them, he stood up and embraced both women, tears streaming down his face as he expressed his sorrow. Izuku felt a deep sense of failure. He wished he could have been there to protect his friend. Izumi expressed her sorrow, wishing she had been by his side. The three of them shared a heartfelt embrace for a few moments before they reluctantly separated and took their seats. An hour passed, and finally, a doctor emerged. Inko anxiously asked about her son's condition. The doctor, addressing Ms. Yagi, informed her that Izuku was in critical condition. They were doing everything possible, but the outcome was uncertain. Even if he survived, there was a possibility he would need life support indefinitely. Inko's eyes filled with tears at the thought. Toshi expressed gratitude to the doctor, who reassured them that they would do their utmost to keep Izuku alive. With that, the doctor returned to the room. A full day went by without the three leaving the hospital. The medical team worked tirelessly to stabilize Izuku. After a complicated process, they succeeded. Izuku was now stable, though still unconscious. Another day passed, and finally, Izuku opened his eyes. The doctor emerged from his room with a smile, bringing hope to the Yagi family. He announced that Izuku was awake, and joy filled their hearts as tears of relief streamed down their faces. Inko thanked the doctor profusely, while All Might expressed his gratitude as well. The doctor humbly stated that he was just doing his job. Izumi eagerly asked if they could see Izuku now. The doctor explained that they still needed to run some tests and that Izuku would need time to process everything that had happened. He promised to let them know when they could enter. After a few more hours, the doctor finally permitted them to see Izuku. They rushed into the room, careful around his life support, and embraced him tightly. As they hugged him and shed tears, Izuku maintained a neutral expression. However, each time he heard the word, "sorry," a growing anger bubbled within him until it erupted. He shouted for them to get off him, using all the strength he could muster with his one arm to push them away. Inko immediately apologized, concerned that they had hurt him. Izuku kept his head lowered, and All Might called out to him, sensing something was wrong. Izumi asked if he was okay, but Izuku's eyebrows furrowed in frustration. He declared that they should never refer to him as family again, making it clear that he felt deeply conflicted about their relationship. The next day, many doctors entered Izuku's room, equipped with various tools to perform his surgery. They began by implanting a prosthetic arm, installing a port that would connect wires to his nerves, allowing for natural movement. The surgery lasted a full day until the prosthetic was successfully installed. Once the arm was in place, the doctors focused on his respiratory system. This surgery took 3 days, during which they worked diligently to artificially rebuild most of his respiratory functions. Eventually, they managed to install an artificial respirator, connecting it from a mask to a large box that pumped air into his lungs. Although it would be uncomfortable to move around like that, it was certainly better than nothing. After 2 weeks of constant checkups and therapy for his new arm, Izuku was finally discharged and allowed to return home. Once back, he made it clear that he wouldn't return to school. Instead, he opted to finish his studies online. After negotiating with the principal, the arrangement was accepted, and Izuku no longer had to attend the school in person. Izuku developed a habit of walking around the nearby areas to keep himself physically active. His parents were initially opposed, arguing it was dangerous, but after Izuku persisted for 3 days, they relented and gave him permission. For a week, Izuku enjoyed his walks, but one day, 3 men confronted him on the road. The first man remarked on how expensive Izuku's arm looked, while the second pointed at his respirator box and suggested they take it. Izuku, feeling threatened, insisted that he needed it to live. The men, undeterred, closed in on him. Suddenly, an old man with white hair, blue eyes, and a black shirt intervened, commenting on the low nature of attacking someone who was handicapped. The thugs dismissed him, but the old man challenged them to find someone their own size. When one of the men lunged at him with a knife, the old man sidestepped, disarmed him, and swiftly knocked him out with a well-placed punch. The second thug transformed his hands into hammers and attempted to strike the old man. However, the old man blocked the blow and used his agility to bring the thug down to the ground. The third thug, armed with a metal arm, charged at him, but the old man sidestepped again and threw him against a wall, leaving all 3 thugs unconscious. Izuku, amazed by the old man's skills, expressed his admiration. The old man advised him to be more cautious, especially given his circumstances. When Izuku asked for his name, the old man introduced himself as Dan Ban. Izuku recognized him as a famous martial artist and was surprised to learn that Dan was also quirkless. Dan inquired why Izuku hadn't used his quirk to defend himself, to which Izuku explained that he was quirkless. Dan reassured him that there was no shame in that, attributing his own strength to hard training. Later, they sat in Dan's dojo, where Dan lamented how few young people came to learn martial arts these days, as most were focused solely on refining their quirks. Izuku shared his dream of becoming a hero, particularly for those who were quirkless, and explained his plans to attend UA, along with backup options. Dan was impressed by Izuku's detailed notes on how to improve his arm and respirator, asking why he didn't ask his parents for help. Izuku hesitated, recounting his experiences with his family, bullies, and the challenges he faced, which brought tears to his eyes. Understanding Izuku's desire to prove himself, Dan offered to help him. He asked for a list of materials needed for Izuku's upgrades and proposed to take him on as his disciple. Izuku was taken aback by the offer, feeling it was too generous given their brief acquaintance. However, Dan recognized Izuku's potential and believed he was worthy of inheriting his fighting style. After a moment of contemplation, Izuku accepted Dan's offer, grateful for the opportunity. Dan then provided him with the materials he needed to enhance his arm and respirator. An entire week passed as Izuku diligently worked on improving his prosthetic arm and mask. After many restless nights, he finally succeeded. His new arm was lighter and more durable, crafted from a special alloy with room for future upgrades. He added a blaster that could emerge from the palm of his hand, ensuring he would be ready if a villain attempted to attack him again. He also enhanced his mask, discarding the bulky box, which allowed for greater mobility. Now fully prepared, he began his training. The first 3 weeks were dedicated to building his body and stamina. He also focused on adapting to his new life with the prosthetics and mask. His parents and Izumi noticed the changes in him and asked what had happened, but he simply replied that it was none of their business. Izuku then turned his attention to martial arts techniques. His remarkable mind allowed him to replicate movements with high precision after seeing them just once, even the complex ones, enabling him to progress rapidly. His body continued to grow stronger, developing defined muscles rather than bulk. Finally, after 6 months, school officially ended, and high school enrollment opened. All over Japan, thousands of middle school students were eager to join their dream high schools, and Izuku Midoriya was no exception. He had trained under his new mentor for months, aware that he still had a long way to go, but confident in his skills to at least pass the entrance exam. He woke up like any other day, ready to call and secure his spot for the exam. As he ate breakfast, Toshinori sat down in front of him, which Izuku found bothersome. He chose to ignore Toshinori, not wanting his environment to become filled with constant shouting. Each time Toshinori attempted to speak to him, Izuku felt a surge of anger. He was furious, but instead of expressing it verbally, he preferred to channel that energy into practice, often leaving the training dummies at Dan's dojo battered and broken. When Toshinori sat down, Izuku grabbed his plate and stood up. Toshinori insisted that he needed to talk. Izuku turned away, uninterested. Toshinori pleaded for him to listen, claiming it was important. Realizing Toshinori would not relent, Izuku decided to give him a moment. He told Toshinori to make it quick. Toshinori revealed that he was all might. Izuku's eyes widened in disbelief. How could this frail man be the symbol of peace? But as he thought it over, he recognized the similarities: the same hair color, eyes, height, and voice. A shadow fell over Izuku's eyes, and he spoke without turning back. Toshinori asked if Izuku truly planned to join the hero course at UA. Izuku confirmed his intention. Toshinori then explained that his quirk, one for all, had been passed down through many holders. He had seen Izuku's progress and determination but expressed concern about his lack of a quirk. Toshinori offered to pass his power to Izuku, believing it would help him become the hero he aspired to be. A moment of silence followed. Toshinori called out to Izuku, who slowly turned around, tears in his eyes. He reflected on how Toshinori had been his greatest hero, yet he had never trusted him enough to share the truth. Izuku felt betrayed, believing Toshinori had contributed to his struggles and left him in a difficult situation. Toshinori attempted to speak, but Izuku interrupted, expressing his anger. He declared that he neither needed nor wanted Toshinori's power, suggesting he could keep it for all he cared. He then mentioned that Izumi was the one who was supposed to inherit it. Inko felt a rush of emotions as she tried to reach out to her son. Izuku, overwhelmed with frustration, expressed his anger. He questioned why she had the audacity to come to him now after years of neglect. He revealed the pain he had endured, feeling bullied and harassed by his sister, and wondered if she would have even bothered to show up if he weren't in such a dire situation. Izumi attempted to defend their family, but Izuku dismissed her words as lies, insisting that he no longer wanted to see them. Just then, a doctor and 2 nurses entered the room, interrupting the tense moment. The doctor informed them that Izuku was disturbed by their presence and asked them to leave. Once outside, the 3 family members sat in silence, tears streaming down their faces as they confronted the harsh truth of their actions. Izumi, feeling overwhelmed, stood up to collect herself but encountered her friend Shota, who rushed over to embrace her. The 2 boys followed closely behind, concerned for her well-being. Shota asked what had happened and how Izuku was doing. Unable to contain her emotions, Izumi broke down in tears. Her friends guided her to a chair, and Shota offered comfort, though he shared her worries about Izuku's condition. As Izumi explained the situation, relief washed over Shota when he learned that Izuku was stable, but sadness filled the air as she recounted his anger and feelings of abandonment. Bakugo, frustrated, pointed out that they had only tried to help him. Shoto agreed, encouraging Izumi not to take Izuku's words to heart. However, Izumi felt the weight of guilt, acknowledging her shortcomings as a sister. She vowed to do everything in her power to mend their relationship and restore their bond. Shota pledged his support, eager to help both siblings find happiness. Izumi expressed her gratitude, and Shoto reiterated his commitment to assist her in any way he could. Bakugo, though reluctant, eventually agreed to stand by them. Meanwhile, Inko and Toshi remained outside the room, their heads bowed in shame. Toshi gathered the courage to speak to the doctor, inquiring about the possibility of Izuku being freed from life support. The doctor confirmed that while it was possible, the procedures were delicate and costly. Inko insisted that they would cover the expenses, pleading for the doctor to discuss the options with Izuku. The doctor entered Izuku's room, ready to convey his parents' wishes. Izuku interrupted, insisting that he did not want to refer to them as his parents. The doctor sighed, explaining that they wanted to know if he would consider a medical procedure that would allow him more mobility through life support, as well as the option for a prosthetic limb, despite the potential pain involved. Izuku contemplated the offer. He realized that while he had deep-seated resentment towards his family, this was a chance for him to move forward and pursue his dream of becoming a hero. With determination, he agreed to the procedure, signaling his readiness to take the next step in his journey. Izuku felt a surge of determination as he confronted All Might. He expressed his frustration about being left alone and declared that he did not want to follow in All Might's footsteps. He was determined to grow and become a hero on his own merits, regardless of All Might's doubts. After storming out of the room, Izuku went to his own space and picked up the phone, dialing a number while trying to calm his racing thoughts. When a woman answered, he stated his intention to enlist in the UA Hero course. However, the woman informed him that his request had been rejected due to his disabilities and the fact that he was quirkless. This revelation shattered Izuku's hopes, and he ended the call in anger, throwing the phone across the room in frustration. Feeling betrayed, he stormed into the kitchen where he found All Might cooking. Izuku confronted him, accusing him of sabotaging his chances to join the hero course unless he inherited All Might's quirk. All Might remained silent, knowing he deserved the accusations. In a fit of rage, Izuku threw a nearby bottle of water at him before leaving the house, leaving All Might alone with his thoughts and regret. As Izuku walked down the road, he found solace in the dojo, a place he cherished. There, he took out his frustrations on a training dummy, delivering powerful punches and kicks while venting about the situation. Dan, a friend, watched him and urged him to calm down. Izuku struggled to contain his anger but eventually realized he needed to listen to Dan. Dan spoke about the importance of not letting anger consume him. He encouraged Izuku to channel his feelings into something productive, reminding him that he could still become a hero in his own way. Izuku expressed his desire to create a better society for those without quirks, and Dan supported his vision, emphasizing that progress, no matter how small, was still progress. After some time, Izuku returned home, ready to take the next step in his journey. As he approached his room, All Might called out to him, asking for a moment of his time. All Might revealed that he had spoken with UA's principal, who was willing to give Izuku a chance to participate in the hero course without the expectation of inheriting one for all. However, Izuku had made up his mind, he would join the support course instead. He wanted to be a hero in his own unique way, and with that conviction, he closed the door, ready to take the first step toward his future. In Dan's dojo, the sounds of kicks and strikes echoed through the space. Inside, Dan skillfully dodged a punch from Izuku, then swiftly brought him down to the floor. He twisted Izuku's arm behind his back, pressing forward with his foot. Izuku tapped the floor, signaling his SBM-sen, and Dan released him. Dan acknowledged Izuku's progress, noting that with continued training he would soon surpass him. Izuku expressed gratitude but felt a tinge of sadness about the training possibly going to waste. Dan reassured him that the skills and values learned would be invaluable in the future. He reminded Izuku to make a good impression for the upcoming exam, to which Izuku agreed enthusiastically before heading out, promising to stay safe and not to get too carried away with his inventions. Izuku returned home, feeling comfortable with his mask and prosthetic arm. Although advanced, his prosthetic still had limitations, particularly when it came to writing. He had learned to use his left hand for this purpose, thanks to a tutor Dan had arranged for him. His handwriting had improved significantly, allowing him to develop plans and sketches for his inventions, and he was excited about his latest creation. After a quick bath and breakfast, Izuku waited for his sister Izumi, who was running late due to poor time management. Since Izuku had declined the one-for-all quirk, Izumi had become its new holder. She practiced diligently, now able to hardship 10% of its power. As Izuku stood by the door, he noticed Izumi finally approaching, looking flustered. He waited for her because their parents insisted they go together for safety reasons, even though he had been going to Dan's dojo alone for months. Izumi was a preferable companion, as he had learned to tune out her more annoying traits. Izumi apologized for her tardiness, and Izuku responded dismissively as he opened the door for them to leave. Maintaining his distance, he carried his sketchbook, using it as an excuse to avoid conversation. Although he appeared focused, he was merely pretending to scribble notes. Izumi struggled with the urge to talk to him, wanting to reconnect as they had before her bullying behavior. Finally, she gathered her courage to speak, but her friends interrupted her approach. Shota, one of her friends, noticed Izuku and hesitated, feeling the need to apologize for not standing up for him in the past. However, recalling Izumi's advice, she decided against it. As the group of friends gathered, they exchanged greetings and discussed their readiness for the exam. Bakugo boasted about his preparation, while Shoto reminded him to show respect. Izumi felt uncomfortable knowing Izuku could hear their conversation but chose to ignore it. They soon realized it was getting late and hurried to the exam location, with Izuku trailing behind at a safe distance. Upon arriving at UA, Izuku was awed by the surroundings but quickly turned his attention to Izumi, who nearly stumbled but was saved by a girl with a unique hairstyle. He chuckled at the sight and decided to move past them toward his examination area. As he walked by, Uraraka noticed him and turned to Izumi, expressing surprise at Izuku's appearance. Izumi introduced him as her brother, explaining that he was attending the support course. Uraraka was impressed by his mask and prosthetic, curious about what had happened to him. Izumi explained the accident that led to his prosthetic and respirator, mentioning that he had built them himself. In the exam zone, Izuku took a seat among the other candidates, feeling a heightened sense of awareness, as if danger was approaching. His instincts, honed through Dan's training, kicked in when a girl with pink hair leaned too close for comfort. She poked at his mask, excitedly asking about its functionality. She then grabbed his robotic arm, marveling at its uniqueness and asking where he had obtained it. Izuku felt the need to remind her about personal space, but she was too excited to listen. Hexcss pleaded for him to tell her more, and he suggested that if she calmed down and sat in her chair, he would explain. She quickly complied, eager to hear what he had to say. Izuku explained that the arm was of his own design, which astonished Hexcss. She expressed her admiration, exclaiming how impressive it was that he had created such technology. When she asked about his quirk, Izuku hesitated, revealing that he didn't actually have one. Hexcss was taken aback, but her excitement only grew as she realized he had built everything without a quirk, declaring him a worthy rival. Izuku found it refreshing that Hexcss didn't care about his lack of a quirk. She introduced herself as Mei Hexcss and expressed her enthusiasm for working with him. Izuku introduced himself in return, and they continued to discuss inventions. Hexcss referred to her creations as her babies, which intrigued Izuku. Their conversation was interrupted when a teacher entered the room. Powerloader introduced himself as the evaluator for their inventions and reminded everyone to have their sketches ready. He explained the evaluation process, emphasizing the importance of creativity and functionality. The applicants took turns entering the workshop, and after what felt like an eternity, It was finally Izuku's turn. He stepped inside, greeted by a vast array of materials. Power Loader encouraged him to showcase his skills, and Izuku immediately got to work. Having previously built his invention with the help of Dan, he felt confident in his abilities and worked quickly. Power Loader observed Izuku's speed, wondering if he was either nervous or exceptionally skilled. After 25 minutes, Izuku completed his project and presented it to Power Loader. When asked what it was, he confidently replied that it was a zero-point reactor. Power Loader was astonished, noting that such a concept was once considered theoretical. Izuku assured him that it was real and that he could demonstrate its functionality later. Power Loader, still in disbelief, allowed Izuku to leave, informing him that he would receive his results in a week. As Izuku exited, he spotted Mei, who gave him a thumbs up, and he returned the gesture. He then made his way to Yue's entrance, where he found Izumi waiting for him. They began walking together, and she asked how his exam had gone, curious if he thought he had passed. Izuku, feeling good after his experience with Mei, replied affirmatively, surprising Izumi with his response. She expressed her happiness, and they continued home, both anticipating the news that would change their lives. In the UA meeting room after the exams, the staff, including All Might, gathered to discuss their observations. Aizawa noted that he would evaluate the candidates further and mentioned that the top 40 had been decided. Vlad agreed, stating that all the applicants showed promise. Midnight remarked on All Might's daughter, commenting on her impressive performance during the exam. All Might humbly attributed her success to hard work, while Aizawa expressed concern about her potential similarities to All Might. Power Loader then stood up, prompting Nizu to inquire if something was wrong. He revealed that Izuku Midoriya was All Might's stepson and presented the zero-point reactor Izuku had created. The staff was puzzled, and Power Loader explained that this reactor, previously theoretical, had the potential to revolutionize energy sources. He described how Izuku had built it in under 25 minutes, and after testing it, the energy output had nearly overwhelmed the facility's circuits. Power Loader insisted that Izuku's lack of a quirk made his achievement even more remarkable, suggesting he could be one of the greatest minds of the century. Nizu expressed interest in Izuku and asked Power Loader to keep an eye on him. He requested All Might to bring Izuku to him for an intelligence assessment, which All Might reluctantly agreed to, pondering how to convince Izuku to cooperate. Later at the Yagi household, All Might returned home after the meeting and greeted his family. He went upstairs to what he referred to as the cave and knocked on Izuku's door, asking if he could speak with him about something important. After a brief silence, he opened the door to find Izuku engrossed in his notebook. Izuku turned to him, reminding him about the concept of privacy, and All Might apologized for interrupting. But Principal Nizu wanted to speak with Izuku. All Might explained that it was related to his exam, and Izuku, feeling a bit annoyed, told All Might to leave him alone. With that, Izuku returned to his notebook, and All Might slowly closed the door, feeling accomplished. Time passed, and Izuku walked down the empty halls of UA with All Might. After an awkward tour of the building, they finally reached the principal's office. All Might knocked on the door, and Nizu invited them in. Izuku opened the door and stepped inside, closing it behind him to face the unusual animal-like principal. Nizu greeted Izuku warmly and asked him to take a seat. Izuku complied, thinking about how strange it was to be in front of a talking animal. Nizu inquired if Izuku knew why he was there, to which Izuku replied it was about his entrance exam. Nizu confirmed this and asked if the zero-point reactor was Izuku's own creation. When Izuku affirmed it was, Nizu asked how he had accomplished it. The detailed explanation that lasted 30 minutes. Izuku concluded his thoughts. Nizu expressed his amazement, noting that Izuku had turned a theoretical concept into reality, something most scientists considered science fiction. He felt honored to have Izuku as a student. Izuku, feeling a mix of pride and skepticism, wondered if this meant he passed. Nizu confirmed that they could not reject someone with Izuku's talents, but then pulled out a thick book from under his desk. He asked if Izuku could take a test, assuring him it would not be evaluated. Izuku, seeing the daunting number of pages, decided to take on the challenge, thinking it would keep him away from his classmates. He began to write, determined to show what a quirkless individual could achieve. After 2 hours, Izuku finished the test, while Nizu observed to ensure he didn't cheat. Once done, Nizu told him he could leave. Izuku thanked him and walked to the door, while Nizu began to read through the test. Nizu expressed high expectations for Izuku, who nodded in response before exiting the office. He found All Might asleep in a chair and quietly walked away. Time passed again, and Izuku was practicing in the dojo with Dan. Their sparring sessions had grown more intense as Izuku improved, and he had even started learning swordsmanship. After another round of practice, Izuku found himself pinned to the ground once more. Dan released him after he surrendered and noted that Izuku seemed tense and distracted. Izuku sighed, admitting he couldn't hide his feelings from Dan. He explained how he was trying to channel his anger into self-improvement but felt overwhelmed by the urge to confront his classmates. Dan advised him against acting on vengeance, emphasizing that it would only lead to a cycle of chaos. He encouraged Izuku to focus on changing himself first and assured him that he would have a chance to prove himself in due time. Izuku expressed gratitude for Dan's guidance, acknowledging that without it, he might have gone down a darker path. Dan chuckled, unable to imagine Izuku as a villain, even if the law saw him that way. Izuku then mentioned his meeting with the principal, sharing that Nizu had called him in for an IQ test and that he had been accepted into UA. Dan noted that things were finally moving for Izuku, who felt a mix of excitement and anticipation for the future. Dan reminded him that the coming years would be crucial for defining his path, urging him to enjoy the journey while being prepared for challenges ahead. Izuku nodded in understanding. Time passed again, and Izuku walked through the halls in his UA uniform on the first day of school. Students glanced at him curiously, noticing his mask and metal hand. He had walked with his sister Izumi to school, but they parted ways as their classes were in different areas. Finally, he found Class 1F. Taking a deep breath, he opened the door and prepared to embrace the change. Inside, the students were chatting among themselves when Hexcss suddenly recognized him and approached. She expressed her excitement about him joining the class, and Izuku greeted her while gently pushing her back. Hexcss was thrilled to have someone who understood her and began bombarding him with questions about her inventions. Despite feeling slightly overwhelmed by her enthusiasm, Izuku found himself enjoying their conversation. Ever since the accident, the only person he had genuinely talked to was Dan, so it was nice to have someone his age to relate to. After 15 minutes, Power Loader entered the room, prompting everyone to sit at their desks. He introduced himself as their homeroom teacher for the year and instructed the students to follow him to the auditorium for orientation, where they would learn about the school and meet the staff. The students complied and followed Power Loader to the massive auditorium, where the rest of the first-year classes were already assembled, except for Class 1A. Class 1F took their designated seats and waited for 10 minutes until Nizu stepped up to the podium to speak. Nizu greeted the new students, introducing himself as the principal. He began explaining the school rules and staff. Meanwhile, Izuku found himself drifting off, lost in thought, until a sudden earthquake shook the entire school. Nizu reassured everyone, stating that it was likely Class A conducting practical quirk tests. Whispers filled the auditorium as students speculated about the source of the tremor. Izuku thought to himself that it must have been Izumi. Although she could be a bit reckless, her power was undeniably real, even if she didn't know how to use it properly. Nizu called for quiet to continue his speech. After what felt like an eternity, he finally concluded, and the students were allowed to leave. Upon reaching the classroom, Power Loader asked them to introduce themselves, sharing their names, goals, and quirks. Izuku hesitated, recalling how he had been laughed at in middle school for being quirkless. To his surprise, none of the students mocked him. Instead, many praised him for getting into UA without a quirk, allowing him to connect with some of them. He found his new classmates to be quite pleasant, especially compared to his old ones. While some still ignored him, they did not show open hostility. Classes passed quickly, covering subjects like history, math, drawing, English, art, and literature. There was also an engineering class, the specialty of the course, where he could let his imagination run wild, especially since power loaders seemed less strict with him regarding restrictions. However, Hexcss was another story. Finally, lunch arrived. After hours of sitting, Izuku decided to take a walk to stretch his legs. He wandered the halls of aimlessly until he heard a commotion. Peeking around a corner, he saw 3 students, seemingly a year older than him, surrounding another student his age with purple hair. One student taunted the other, questioning why he wasn't defending himself. Another called him pathetic, while the third insisted he should be expelled. Izuku stepped out from his hiding spot and approached them, asking what was happening. The students turned to him, dismissing him and telling him to mind his own business. They mocked his appearance, particularly his mask. Izuku felt compelled to intervene, stating that he couldn't stand by while a fellow student was bullied. He warned them to stop or he would take action. The first student laughed at him, asking what his quirk was. When Izuku replied that he had none, they erupted in laughter, belittling him for being quirkless. Izuku calmly remarked that their insults revealed their lack of intelligence, which only angered them further. As tensions escalated, one student took a boxing stance, attempting to intimidate Izuku. When he swung a punch, Izuku caught it effortlessly with his metal hand. He warned the student that he shouldn't have done that, then twisted the student's wrist, bringing him down to his knees. With a swift motion, Izuku brought the student's head down to meet his knee, incapacitating him. The second student rushed at Izuku, throwing punches that he blocked with his metal arm, causing the attacker to scream in pain. Izuku then delivered a back fist, knocking him out cold. The third student charged at him, but Izuku intercepted him, grabbing his arm and collar before throwing him to the ground, rendering him unconscious. Izuku turned to the student who had been bullied, who was now standing and looking at him with gratitude. The student asked why Izuku had helped him, to which Izuku replied that it was the right thing to do. The student expressed confusion, noting that Izuku didn't have a quirk. Izuku inquired why the bullies had targeted him. The student explained that his quirk was brainwashing. If he spoke to someone and they responded, he could control them, which led others to label him a villain. Izuku shook his head, declaring that such a quirk was impressive, not something to be ashamed of. Izuku Midoriya and Hitoshi Shinso sat at a table, where Shinso shared that he recognized some of the students from his previous school, noting that they were a year ahead of him and had bullied him for his quirk. Izuku empathized with Shinso, recalling his own past experiences, and decided to open up as well. They both acknowledged their difficult lives, with Izuku expressing that there was no reason to let their pasts bring them down. Shinso inquired about the mask and the arm that Izuku had, to which Izuku explained that he had been in an accident that resulted in the loss of his arm and affected his ability to breathe naturally. He described how the mask was connected to tubes that helped him breathe and provided necessary nutrients, although he could still eat and drink with some limitations. Their conversation lightened as they shared a laugh, but Izuku occasionally felt the gaze of someone watching him, knowing who it was without needing to look. When the bell rang, they parted ways to attend their respective classes. As the school day concluded, Izuku met his sister, Izumi, at the entrance. They walked home in silence until Izumi broke it, asking about his first day. Izuku took a moment to respond, indicating that it had been better, which struck Izumi as a reminder of their past behavior but also made her happy that he was making friends. Izumi apologized for an incident that had caused a shockwave at school, and Izuku playfully reminded her to be careful. The school week passed quickly, with Izuku impressing his classmates with his talents, including developing a device that could summon a shield of solid light. He continued to bond with Shinso and Hexcss during lunch breaks and practiced at the dojo in the afternoons. At the end of the first day of the second week, Power Loader approached Izuku, asking him to wait for a moment. He returned with 13, a pro hero and teacher at their school. 13 explained that Class 1A would be visiting the USJ, a training facility, and needed help with recycled gadgets. She had asked Power Loader for assistance, who suggested Izuku could do a better job. Izuku felt honored by the recognition and agreed to help, asking for a list of materials. 13 promised to send it, and Power Loader assured him he could work on the gadgets in class. Throughout the week, Izuku diligently created the requested items. On Friday, he arrived early, bringing Izumi along to meet 13 and present the gadgets. 13 was impressed with Izuku's work and invited him to accompany her to the USJ, explaining that his creations were so advanced she needed him to help teach the students how to use them. Izuku was taken aback but agreed. Class 1A boarded the bus for their trip to the USJ, engaging in lively conversation. Kirishima speculated about who the strongest students were, pointing to Izumi and her group. Bakugo boasted about their strength, while Todoroki urged him to be quieter. Q suggested Izumi was the strongest, and Uraraka supported her claim, leading to Izumi feeling flattered yet anxious about revealing her connection to All Might. Tenya affirmed her potential as a hero, while Shota teased her for not waking up early enough. Izuku was the one who wanted to arrive about 30 minutes early. Shota pointed out that if it weren't for Izuku, others would likely be arriving late. Izumi reluctantly agreed, acknowledging the truth in Shota's words. Shota noted that Izumi had woken up early because Izuku probably dragged her out of bed. Tsuyu, curious, asked who Izuku was. Uraraka chimed in, explaining that he was Izumi's brother. Kirishima was surprised to learn that Izumi had a brother. Izumi clarified that he was actually her half-brother. Tenya inquired if he studied at UA, to which Izumi confirmed that he did. Mina expressed her surprise at never having seen him before and teased Izumi about their family's good looks. Toru enthusiastically agreed. Izumi explained that he was in the support course and mentioned that he wore a respiratory mask and had a metal arm, which made him stand out. Kirishima recalled seeing him and thought he looked cool, while Tokoyami found him mysterious. Mina remembered seeing his muscular build even in uniform. Izumi noted that he practiced martial arts, a fact she had only recently learned when he mentioned it to their parents to get permission to attend his dojo after school. Ojiro was eager to meet a martial artist like him, while Tenya asked about his quirk. Izumi hesitated, and Bakugo bluntly stated that Izuku didn't have a quirk. Kirishima remarked that this was likely why he was in the support course, but he still looked impressive. Ojiro insisted that experience mattered more than having a quirk. Mina added that she found him attractive regardless of his quirk. Momo recalled seeing him at a representative meeting and thought it would be nice to connect with another class. Izumi hesitated, revealing that things were complicated between them and that they weren't on the best of terms. Tenya suggested that siblings should forgive each other and act like family. Izumi admitted that it was complicated and that her brother had every right to be upset with her. Just then, Aizawa arrived, instructing everyone to prepare to leave the bus, and the students responded affirmatively. At the USJ, Izuku was busy organizing his gadgets while 13 assisted him. Izuku was frustrated, questioning why this was happening to him and vowing to confront whatever higher power was responsible. Suddenly, they heard the sound of an engine outside, and 13 suggested they head to the entrance to wait. As they walked, Izuku asked how long the exercise would take. 13 replied that it would be about 4 hours. Izuku was shocked, realizing he had classes to attend. 13 reassured him that the principal had approved it. He then mentioned that All Might would be coming, and Izuku could ask for an autograph, which only added to Izuku's anxiety. When the doors opened, Class 1A entered and lined up. Kirishima recognized Izuku as Izumi's brother, and Jiro confirmed it. Mina noted that her memory had not failed her. He was indeed good-looking. Izuku felt a wave of embarrassment, wishing Izumi had kept quiet about him. 13 introduced Izuku as someone who had helped develop the new gadgets for their training. Kirishima was impressed, and Tenya acknowledged Izuku's intellect and skills, especially considering he did this without a quirk. As Izuku listened to their praise, he felt a shift from tension to relaxation. Shota, observing him, felt hopeful that she might be able to talk to him and mend their friendship. Izumi reflected on her brother's awesomeness and regretted not recognizing it sooner. 13 began explaining the basics of the training when suddenly, the entire UJ trembled, and the lights flickered. Izuku noticed something strange and then saw a black mist portal open, revealing a woman with light blue hair and a giant bird mutation, along with a man made of moisture. More portals opened, and more figures emerged. Nana, one of the newcomers, demanded to know where All Might was, expressing her intent to eliminate a few students to draw him out. Kirishima, thinking it was all part of the exercise, commented on the fake villains. Izuku quickly corrected him, stating that they were not fake. 13 confirmed that they were indeed real villains, prompting Aizawa to instruct 13 to protect the students. Aizawa sprang into action, using his quirk and capture gear to neutralize several villains quickly. Nana ordered Kurogiri to disperse the students, and he complied, appearing behind them in an instant. Aizawa realized the danger Kurogiri posed and prepared to act. Kurogiri introduced the League of Villains and declared their intention to eliminate All Might. Izumi felt a chill at the thought of harm coming to her father, while Izuku was shocked at their audacity. He then noticed the Nomu standing beside Nana and felt a sense of dread. Kurogiri, realizing All Might was not present, decided to scatter the students. Bakugo charged at him, ready to fight, but Kurogiri opened a portal, causing Bakugo and Kirishima to vanish. The portal expanded, engulfing almost everyone, and Izuku found himself falling into a lake as the chaos unfolded. As he was falling, Izuku noticed a boat not too far away. He spun in the air and managed to grab hold of the ship with his metal arm, pushing himself onto the boat. There, he spotted Shota, who had also created an ice slide and landed on the ship. Izuku asked if Shota had seen anyone else. Shota replied that he thought Izumi and another classmate were nearby. Izuku felt a wave of frustration wash over him, questioning why the universe seemed to conspire against him. Suddenly, they heard a scream from the water and saw Tsu carrying Izumi out of the depths. Izumi landed on her feet, thanks to Tsuyu's quick reflexes. Shota asked if she was okay, and Izumi assured them she was fine, though she froze upon seeing her brother, surprised to find him there. Izuku acknowledged that they were all safe, and Tsuyu confirmed that Izuku was indeed Izumi's brother. Izuku sighed, confirming their relation. Izumi felt a pang in her chest at the revelation. Just then, laughter echoed from the water, and they turned to see a group of villains with water quirks approaching. One villain taunted them to come out and play, while Izumi cursed under her breath. She extended her hand to unleash an energy blast, but before she could act, Izuku smacked her on the head with his metal hand, causing her to fall to the floor, holding her head in surprise. Tsuyu and Shota stared wide-eyed at the scene. Izuku scolded Izumi for her reckless behavior, questioning if she understood the dangers of electricity in water. Izumi apologized, feeling embarrassed. Izuku remarked that she was reinforcing the stereotype of a foolish blonde. Determined to regroup, Izuku proposed they come up with a plan. Shota suggested creating a pathway of ice, which Izuku agreed was a good idea. He then turned to Izumi, explaining that she would need to use her strength to create a spiral in the lake when they were high enough. He instructed Shota to freeze the water to immobilize the villains. Shota confirmed she could do it, and Izuku encouraged them to proceed. Tsuyu admired Izuku's intelligence, and he thanked her. Shota placed her hand on the ground, creating a tall ice pathway. The four of them ran up it, and when they reached the peak, Izuku called for Izumi to act. She aimed down and flicked her fingers, generating a massive wind pressure that created a spiral in the water, just as Izuku had instructed. As the villains were pulled into the vortex, Shota used her quirk to freeze the water, successfully trapping the confused villains. The quartet reached the other side safely. Tsuyu expressed her amazement and introduced herself, while Izuku introduced himself as well. Shota suggested they check the entrance, and Izuku agreed. Izumi, determined to protect All Might, recalled the villains' threats against him. Izuku warned her not to underestimate the villains, suspecting that a strange creature was their means to defeat All Might. Izumi questioned if he meant the creature they had seen, and Shota wondered if Izuku was serious. Izuku affirmed his belief and urged them to move. They stealthily approached the center, hiding as they witnessed the Nomu overpowering Aizawa. Izumi's anger flared, and she stood up, ready to confront the creature, but Izuku grabbed her hair, pulling her back. He admonished her for her impulsive behavior, reminding her that rushing in would lead to her demise. Izuku took a moment to strategize, contemplating how to free Aizawa and defeat the Nomu. He turned to Shota, asking about her ice control and whether she could freeze the Nomu without harming Aizawa. Shota confidently assured him she could. Izuku laid out the plan. Once the Nomu was frozen, Izumi would rush to rescue Aizawa, and Tsuyu would ensure he was moved to safety. The girls nodded in agreement, ready to follow his lead. Tsuyu moved into position, and Izuku signaled for them to act. As ice spread across the floor, it reached the Nomu, encasing it completely. Once frozen, Izumi dashed forward, grabbing Aizawa and passing him to Tsuyu. Izuku and Shota joined her as she charged an energy blast in her hand, releasing it into the frozen Nomu, causing a powerful explosion. The ice shattered, scattering pieces of the Nomu around. Nana, the villain, was incredulous, exclaiming that the Nomu was supposed to defeat All Might and accusing them of cheating. Izuku praised their teamwork, surprising Izumi and causing Shota to blush with pride. However, their relief was short-lived as the Nomu began to regenerate from its shattered pieces, rising once more, unharmed. Nana laughed maniacally, declaring that regeneration was just one of the Nomu's powers and commanded it to attack them. As the Nomu charged, Izuku noticed it was targeting the girls. With quick reflexes, he pulled Izumi back by her hair and pushed Shota aside, raising his metal arm to shield his face just in time. The Nomu's punch sent Izuku flying back against the stairs, leaving him momentarily dazed. Izumi cried out for her brother, charging her arm to unleash a blast at the Nomu's face, sending it reeling. She and Shota rushed to help Izuku stand, both concerned for his well-being. Shota asked if he was okay and if anything was broken, while Izumi questioned his reckless decision to protect them. Izuku felt a surge of urgency as he stood up straight, brushing off the concern of his sister. He acknowledged the formidable creature they faced, noting its tough exterior and remarkable regenerative abilities. Izumi, filled with determination, asked how they could defeat it. Izuku pondered for a moment before turning to Shota, inquiring about the maximum temperature her flames could reach. Shota, caught off guard, blushed slightly at the question. Izuku quickly clarified, asking about the highest intensity of her flames. Shota admitted she wasn't entirely sure but believed they could reach significant heat. Izuku proposed a strategy, suggesting that if Shota could incinerate the creature, it might prevent its regeneration. Shota agreed to try, but she needed time to prepare her flames. Izuku then turned to Izumi, asking if she could hold the creature back while Shota prepared. Izumi felt the weight of the responsibility but accepted the challenge. As Izuku prepared to confront a group of approaching villains, he felt a familiar doubt from Izumi. However, she quickly reassured him of her faith in his abilities, vowing never to doubt him again. With renewed determination, they moved forward. As Izumi charged at the Nomu, Izuku faced the villains. They underestimated him, mocking his youth and declaring their intent to teach him a lesson. One villain lunged at him with sharp claws, but Izuku deftly sidestepped, grabbing the villain's arm and using his momentum to throw him to the ground, knocking the wind out of him. With a swift motion, he stomped on the villain's face, rendering him unconscious. Another villain with blade-like hands attempted to slash at Izuku, but he dodged effortlessly, grabbing the villain's leg and sending him crashing to the ground. A third villain, boasting massive fists, tried to land a series of punches, but Izuku evaded them with ease. He blocked one punch with his metal arm, feeling satisfaction as he heard the villain's fingers snap. Izuku retaliated with a punch that sent the villain flying, incapacitating him. As bullets were fired from another villain's fingertips, Izuku charged forward, dodging the shots and landing a powerful blow to the villain's abdomen, causing him to collapse. With the remaining villains taken care of, Izuku turned to face the others, ready for the next challenge. Meanwhile, Izumi was engaged in a fierce battle with the Nomu. Realizing her physical attacks were ineffective due to the creature's shock absorption, she switched tactics, unleashing energy blasts that proved more effective. As fatigue began to set in, she sensed a surge of heat behind her. Shota called out to her just in time, and she moved aside as Izuku finished dealing with the villains. Izuku turned to see Izumi unleash a massive barrage of blue flames that engulfed the Nomu. Their classmates Kirishima, Bakugo, and Shoto arrived just in time to witness the creature consumed by fire. From above, other students watched in awe as the flames died down, revealing the Nomu reduced to ashes. Nana, witnessing the defeat of her creation, erupted in disbelief, accusing them of cheating. Izuku, undeterred, signaled to Izumi that it was time to finish things. She charged her arms with energy, preparing for a final attack. Together, they unleashed a powerful blast aimed at Kurogiri and Nana, who quickly opened a portal to escape just as the attack struck the side of the US. As the dust settled and the villains vanished, a collective sigh of relief swept through the group. Suddenly, the doors burst open, and All Might made his grand entrance, surveying the scene with a look of surprise as everyone stared at him in silence. Izuku couldn't help but exclaim in frustration, wishing All Might had arrived a little later. The students were ushered out of the USJ, the battle concluded, and the professionals were apprehending the villains. Aizawa and 13 needed immediate transport to the nearest hospital to begin their recovery. Inside a deflated All Might stood before Izuku and Izumi. He appeared nervous as Izuku glared at him, while Izumi maintained a deadpan expression. All Might attempted to explain himself, but Izuku cut him off, expressing his frustration. He emphasized the importance of prioritizing the safety of students over the needs of others. He pointed out the danger of All Might's dwindling time and the potential consequences if he had been unable to fight. Izuku's words, borrowed from Izumi's perspective, struck a chord, and he left the scene. All Might reflected on how Izuku reminded him of Sir. Izumi agreed with Izuku, noting that All Might was no longer in peak condition after years of fighting. She expressed her concern for his well-being, acknowledging that even Izuku cared in his own way. All Might sighed, admitting that they were right, and suggested they move on. On the bus back to school, the students settled in, and Izuku gathered the gadgets they were meant to use. He chose a seat next to Izumi, hoping to avoid the attention of the rest of the class. Kirishima praised the girls for their bravery during the battle, while Tsuyu wished she could have done more. Shota reminded them that they had helped save Mr. Aizawa, and Jiro expressed concern for him. Uraraka noted that 13 had also suffered injuries, and Kaminari marveled at their survival. Tokoyami reflected on the dark moments they faced. Toru admitted to feeling scared, and Izumi echoed the sentiment. Bakugo claimed he wasn't afraid, prompting Todoroki to tell him to be quiet. Bakugo reacted defensively, and Momo remarked on Izumi's calm demeanor during the chaos. Izumi credited her brilliant strategist, pointing to Izuku, which earned her a glare from him. Mina suddenly jumped up, excited to meet Izuku. She introduced herself and complimented him, suggesting they exchange numbers. Tenya intervened, insisting Mina stop bothering Izuku, which she reluctantly did. Tenya introduced himself as the vice president of the class, and Izuku introduced himself as the president of Class 1F. They shook hands, and Momo joined in, recalling their meeting at the representatives' gathering. Kirishima pushed through to greet Izuku, calling him manly and praising his performance against the villains. Ojiro then approached, revealing he was also a martial artist and expressing interest in Izuku's training. They shook hands, and Ojiro was surprised to learn that Izuku trained under the legendary Danban, capturing the attention of everyone on the bus. Kirishima and Tenya expressed their admiration for Danban, while Bakugo felt frustrated that Izuku was training under such a renowned figure. Todoroki found the situation intriguing, and Ojiro acknowledged Izuku's impressive combat skills. Tenya questioned why Izuku wasn't in the hero course, given his remarkable abilities. The week off for UA students after the USJ incident passed quickly. Izuku spent his time training at the dojo, which had become his routine. He also read books and designed new support items, often in the living room where he felt comfortable even with Izumi present. He interacted with her only when necessary, which pleased her. Finally, they returned to school, and Izuku entered his classroom. Hatsum rushed toward him, expressing her worry for his safety after the attack. Izuku reassured her that he was fine, though Hatsum offered to create life support if needed, prompting an amusing image in Izuku's mind. He quickly clarified that he had not sustained any serious injuries, and Hatsum decided to save her prototype for later, realizing they were late for class. "Let's go in." Izuku wondered if she had expected him to get injured just so she could test her tangled mess of wires. At this point he was not even surprised. The first classes passed without much incident. The only notable event was that Izuku found himself surrounded by other support corps students, all expressing their concern and bombarding him with questions. Then, Power Loader arrived to make a significant announcement. Power Loader informed the students that in 3 weeks, the UA Sports Festival would be held, hosted by the Heroics Department. While the event primarily showcased the Heroics students, the support corps students also had the opportunity to shine by displaying their inventions. They would participate in the events as usual, but they could use any design they created themselves. With no limits on creativity, Power Loader encouraged them to let their imaginations run wild and show everyone what they were capable of, pushing them to go plus ultra. After class ended, Izuku stepped out of the room and spotted Shinso waiting for him. Shinso greeted him and asked if he could join him. Izuku agreed, and they began walking through the halls. Shinso inquired about Izuku's experience fighting the villains, checking if he was alright. Izuku reassured him that he was fine, remarking that it was quite the experience, especially since it wasn't every day one fought a buffed McChicken. Shinso mentioned that he had seen the pictures released from the USJ attack and brought up the upcoming sports festival. He explained that his goal was to enter the heroics course, and the festival was his only chance to make that happen. Izuku listened intently as Shinso expressed his desire to learn about the opponents he would face. Izuku acknowledged that he could share what he knew about the Class 1A students, to which Shinso responded with enthusiasm. However, Izuku reminded him that he would also be one of the opponents Shinso would face. Shinso was surprised, thinking the support course would only be there to showcase their gadgets. Izuku clarified that the last match was typically a battle tournament and hinted at some unresolved matters he needed to address. Shinso expressed his concern about their potential fight, asking Izuku not to go too hard on him. Izuku encouraged him not to be so pessimistic and offered to help him train in the basics of combat. Shinso was taken aback but intrigued by the offer, questioning why Izuku would help him since they would be rivals. Izuku simply stated that it was what friends do, and they shared a small fist bump. As they approached their destination, they encountered a large crowd of students gathered at the entrance to Class 1A. Izuku noted that Shinso was not the only one interested in gathering information. Shinso recognized the potential problem and followed Izuku as he pushed through the crowd. Eventually, they reached the front and saw Izumi's group in the doorway, with Izumi arguing with a blonde-haired boy and another boy with gray hair. Shinso pointed out the blonde girl, asking if she was Izuku's sister. Izuku clarified that she was his half-sister and warned Shinso to be cautious of her, as her power was formidable despite her antics. He compared her strength to that of All Might, leaving Shinso in disbelief. Izuku continued to explain the abilities of the other students, mentioning the twins who had the half-cold half-hot quirk and were trained by Endeavor, as well as the egotistical blonde boy who could create explosions from his palms. Shinso was concerned about facing such strong opponents, but Izuku reassured him that if he chose his words wisely, he could engage them in conversation. Their attention was drawn back to the argument, which was escalating. Monoma taunted the group, claiming they were pathetic and suggesting they had cried during the villain attack. Izumi defended herself, insisting that Monoma knew nothing of what had happened. Shoto urged them to move aside so they could go to lunch, while Bakugo threatened to move them himself. Tetsu challenged Bakugo, and Monoma continued to mock them. As the tension rose, Shota attempted to mediate, reminding everyone they were supposed to be on the same team. Momo stepped forward to support Shota, emphasizing the need for unity. Tenya echoed her sentiment, stating that their behavior was not heroic. Suddenly, a loud clank echoed through the air as Monoma fell to the ground, knocked out. Izuku stood behind him, his metal arm raised, expressing his disdain for people like Monoma. Tetsu confronted Izuku, demanding to know who he thought he was. Izuku calmly introduced himself as the president of Class 1F and pointed out the presence of several student council members, warning Tetsu that their involvement could lead to serious consequences. Shinso observed the unfolding situation, noting the duel of wits taking place. Tetsu hesitated, unsure of how to respond. Just then, an unexpected voice shouted at them, and Tetsu was knocked down, rendered unconscious. Kendo sighed and stepped to the front. She expressed her apologies for the problems caused by her classmates. Izuku acknowledged her position as the president of Class 1B. Kendo confirmed that she had overheard his comments and promised to ensure that her classmates would face appropriate consequences, pleading with him not to file a formal complaint. Izuku admitted he had no intention of doing so, as the paperwork seemed too burdensome. He then turned to Momo, asking for her thoughts. Momo stated that if Kendo was going to handle the situation, she wouldn't pursue it further either. Kendo thanked them both, reiterating her apologies for the trouble caused. She then took hold of Monoma and Tetsu, leading them away. Izuku felt relieved that the matter was resolved. Izumi expressed her gratitude to him, and he brushed it off, noting that Kendo had simply gotten on his nerves. Momo reflected on how she should have managed the situation better. Izuku reassured her that he hadn't done much, acknowledging that no one expects to deal with such conflicts. He then raised his voice for everyone blocking the hallway to hear, warning them to disperse or risk a warning from the student council. At his command, the crowd quickly scattered, leaving only Shinso behind as Class 1A was free to head to lunch. Tenya praised Izuku for his effective approach, expressing a desire to learn from him. Kirishima marveled at how Izuku managed to clear the area without resorting to threats or violence, calling it very manly. Denki chimed in, thanking Izuku and contrasting his method with Bakugo's more explosive approach. Bakugo retorted, questioning the other's intelligence. Mina complimented Izuku, while Uraraka admitted she wouldn't have thought to say something like that. Momo thanked Izuku again, apologizing for involving him in the situation. Izuku reassured her that it was no trouble, emphasizing that conflicts aren't always resolved through brute force. Sometimes, words can be powerful tools. Izumi listened intently, contemplating how to express her own feelings of regret beyond mere words. As the lunch hour approached, Izuku invited Shinso to join him for lunch. Shinso agreed, and Izuku waved goodbye to his classmates as he walked away. Izumi pondered how to convey her apology effectively, wishing for a way to communicate her feelings beyond just words. In 3 weeks, the UA Sports Festival was set to begin, the most significant sports event in the world since the Olympics. Students from all years and courses were preparing, determined not to let their opportunity to shine slip away. However, they had to be cautious of 3 others: a quirky inventor with a penchant for creating explosive devices, a mind manipulator currently training under a peculiar mentor, and that mentor, a brilliant yet eccentric genius. Izuku dedicated the entire 3 weeks to working late into the night in UA's workshop, designing inventions to assist him during the upcoming trials. The jet boots were particularly challenging. He needed to ensure they functioned properly and didn't send him soaring uncontrollably. Learning to use them effectively took him a week each, but after 2 weeks of trial and error, he finally succeeded. Only 1 week remained. Izuku pressed on, creating a small computer embedded in his arm to help manage the new modifications. He developed a shield of solid light that could be installed in his arm and a blaster in the palm of his hand, inspired by an old movie featuring a superhero in a mech suit. He also crafted an electric blaster, a more advanced version of a taser that could incapacitate a target for several seconds or even minutes. This device featured an advanced aiming system to minimize the risk of missing and hitting unintended targets. Each invention was powered by its own mini zero-point reactor. Fortunately, he had already devised the plans for these inventions earlier, allowing him to assemble them efficiently. After 5 days of relentless work, he completed everything with 2 days to spare, leading him to create 2 final items: a pair of spadron-type swords and a zero-point blaster that could manipulate objects, akin to telekinesis. However, it only worked on inanimate objects, as he had yet to perfect it for living beings due to the potential harm it could cause. He learned this the hard way when Izumi endured some discomfort during his testing. Meanwhile, Izumi was not idle during those days. While Izuku toiled in the workshop, she sought permission to use the gym, training diligently. Occasionally, she brought Shota along, waiting for Izuku to emerge from the workshop, dusty and indicating he had encountered a minor setback in his projects. Finally, the day of the UA Sports Festival arrived. In the morning, Izuku was in the dojo, energetically kicking and punching the training dummies. Dan reminded him not to waste too much energy, emphasizing the importance of conserving strength for the big day. Izuku expressed his excitement, revealing that he had always dreamed of participating in the UA Sports Festival since childhood. Dan encouraged him, hoping he hadn't built anything overly dangerous. After sharing a light-hearted moment, Izuku acknowledged that he had some unfinished business with certain individuals. He revealed that his efforts in creating gadgets were partly to secure a position in the tournament, but he was determined to confront his rivals using his own skills. He displayed the 2 swords he had brought, affirming his intention to face them directly. Dan advised him to keep his emotions in check during the competition, warning that in the heat of battle, one could easily lose themselves to anger. Izuku understood and prepared to leave, realizing he was running late. He dashed out of the dojo, relieved that it was early morning and few would question why he was running with 2 swords. Upon reaching home, he hurriedly opened the door, tossing his swords aside as he rushed upstairs. In his haste, he knocked on Izumi's door to wake her, but misjudged his strength and accidentally punched a hole through it, effectively waking her up. After 30 minutes of preparation, they stormed out of the house and reached the school in under 10 minutes. As they walked through the halls, it was time for them to part ways. Izumi turned to Izuku, encouraging him to do his best. After a brief moment of silence, he agreed, and they went their separate ways. Izuku approached his classroom door, but something instinctual prompted him to step aside and open it cautiously. Peeking out, he spotted Hexcss, who leaped forward, grabbing him by the shoulders and shaking him excitedly. Izuku resigned himself to the situation, knowing he could never escape her enthusiasm. Hexcss eagerly expressed her anticipation to test her inventions. Izuku felt a surge of excitement as he prepared to showcase his inventions. Hexcss, brimming with enthusiasm, shook him in her eagerness. Once she realized her actions, she stopped, allowing Izuku to regain his composure. Hexcss expressed her anticipation to see the creations he had made, confident that they would rival her own. Izuku playfully warned her not to cry when he emerged victorious. They shared a light-hearted laugh before entering the classroom, where they awaited the start of the event. The UA Sports Festival commenced, and the students surged out of the stadium. Suddenly, a wave of ice began to freeze everyone in place, a display of Shoto's power. He declared his intention to win, but Izumi, determined and fierce, broke through the ice and sprinted ahead, quickly surpassing him. Shoto acknowledged her speed but remained resolute in his determination to compete. Katsuki, not one to be left behind, challenged Shoto, using his explosions to propel himself forward. Shota, joining the fray, glided along an ice path, catching up with the others. Soon, more members of Class 1A managed to break free from Todoroki's icy trap and began to close the gap. Present Mike marveled at Class 1A's performance, praising their skills and inquiring about Aizawa's teaching methods. Aizawa explained that they had learned to adapt and survive after facing a villain attack, understanding the realities of the world they lived in. Present Mike acknowledged their resilience, but Aizawa's thoughts drifted to another matter, wondering about the whereabouts of a certain individual. Present Mike, curious, pressed for more information. Then the sound of what seemed like a sudden move alerted everyone in the area. Present Mike expressed his surprise, wondering what had just happened. In the teacher area, Power Load declared that it was time for the show, smirking confidently. Throughout the stadium, a sonic boom echoed, and the students in the race felt something rush past them at incredible speed. Bakugo, who was flying using his explosions, was knocked off course and fell to the ground as the figure zipped by. It then soared over Shoto, Shota, and Izumi. The 3 of them were taken aback, questioning what they had just witnessed. The figure turned around, revealing Izuku, who was flying with his jet boots. He stated that he had a few things to prove before flying away. Present Mike announced to the audience that in a surprising twist, Izuku Midoriya, the ace of the support course, had taken the lead. In the dojo, Dan remarked on Izuku's impressive abilities, expressing his admiration. Meanwhile, on the stairs, various heroes reacted to the unexpected turn of events. Some were astonished that a support corps student was leading, while others were skeptical about how long he could maintain that position. Conversations buzzed about Izuku's talent and the mystery of his quirk, with some praising him and others questioning his capabilities due to his quirkless status. As the track unfolded, Izuku sped ahead, leaving the other competitors behind. He thought to himself that he should lower his speed, as flying at such high velocities was challenging and he didn't want to strain the generator by flying too high. He slowed down slightly but continued to move quickly. Izumi called out to Izuku, expressing her desire to win as well. He turned to see her racing forward, using her two quirks, with both Todorokis close behind. Momo and Ito were also not far behind, along with the rest of Class 1A, some from Class 1B, and Shinso and Hatsum. Shinso felt frustrated, acknowledging that Izuku was giving them no chance. Hatsum admitted she had underestimated him but insisted the battle was not over yet. Izuku pressed on, determined to keep moving forward. Present Mike announced that it was time for the first true trial, challenging the competitors to demonstrate their skills. Suddenly, a swarm of zero-pointers appeared, causing Izuku to halt and fly back as one attempted to grab him. Izumi shouted that the zero-pointers were back, and Uraraka echoed her concern. Izuku, realizing the challenge ahead, flew back a bit and extended his metal arm, palm open. He resolved not to let this obstacle stop him. His palm began to glow, and a concentrated blast of energy erupted from it, piercing through the zero-pointer effortlessly. He noted to himself that it would take some time to recharge. Present Mike was astonished, questioning how many more tricks Izuku had up his sleeve. Izumi, inspired, charged her arm and released a massive energy blast that took down two zero-pointers. Izuku acknowledged that he needed to keep an eye on her. Continuing to fly forward, Izuku dodged the zero-pointers trying to catch him, while Izumi dashed around them, too quick for them to grasp. Todoroki, not wanting to be outdone, froze one of the zero-pointers. In an unstable position, resembling a time bomb ready to fall, Shota created a path above the zero-pointers with her ice. On the ground, one of the zero-pointers fell on Kirishima and Tetsu, but they were unharmed. Suddenly, Bakugo charged toward Izuku, using his explosions to propel himself forward, shouting that Izuku would pay for what he had done. Izuku turned to face him, ready to take action. He retrieved his taser blaster and, using his aiming system, shot Bakugo, landing a perfect hit. Bakugo fell to the ground, twitching. Izuku continued to fly, reaching the second trial. Present Mike announced the next challenge, a bottomless pit, questioning if the competitors could jump over it or face their demise. Izuku simply flew over the pit, prompting Present Mike to comment on his unique approach. Izumi, moving like a flash, reached the pit and jumped over it, landing on the other side and catching up to Izuku. Izuku, noticing her, prepared his taser again, adjusting the shock level to maximum. He shot it at her, and she fell to her hands, smoke rising around her. Izuku observed her with a puzzled expression, thinking that if she were clever, she would know how to neutralize the electricity with her quirk. As he continued forward, Izuku had to dodge a barrage of ice blasts aimed at him. He turned to see Shoto catching up, creating a trail of ice behind him. Shoto relentlessly shot ice blasts at Izuku, who skillfully dodged them. Izuku aimed his taser at Shoto, but he quickly hit a small ice wall, blocking the shot. Shoto continued to fire ice at Izuku, and Present Mike announced that they were approaching the third trial, the landmines. Izuku, intrigued, had an idea and landed on the ground, prompting Present Mike to question whether he had given up. Shoto remained focused, ready for the next challenge. Pathetic. Shoto kept moving forward, unaware that Izuku was charging his blaster in the palm of his hand. He aimed it at Todoroki, and as Todoroki crossed over the landmines, they detonated beneath him, causing him to fall into the mines and triggering a massive explosion. Izuku noted that 3 had gone down. He continued to fly over the landmines. As he approached the stadium again, he heard a loud boom. Present Mike exclaimed in surprise at the sound. Izuku turned to see Izumi sprinting over the landmines, moving so quickly that the mines didn't have time to react, exploding behind her instead. Izuku couldn't believe his eyes. An idea sparked in his mind. He pressed on, and Izumi soon caught up to him. They were nearly equal in speed as they entered the tunnel. Just before reaching the entrance, Izuku stopped, allowing Izumi to dash through and claim first place. Present Mike announced the winner, Izumi Yagi. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Izumi turned to see her brother calmly walking into the stadium. She questioned why he had stopped, but Izuku simply shrugged and continued walking away. Shota entered in third place, followed by Shoto in fourth and Katsuki in fifth, with the remaining 42 students who advanced to the next round also appearing. Izuku sat on the ground, removing his boots and inspecting them when Hexcss approached him. She praised his performance, expressing her admiration for his skills. Izuku stood up and acknowledged her compliment, agreeing that she had also done well. Hexcss insisted he had to show her how to use his gadgets, and he promised to do so after the festival. Shinso then joined them, commenting on Izuku's tendency to show off. Izuku explained that showcasing their abilities was the purpose of the support course. Shinso remarked on the impressive nature of Izuku's jet boots and blasters, suggesting that defeating him without gadgets was already a challenge, and with them, he was nearly unbeatable. Izuku laughed off the compliment, mentioning that his jet boots were no longer functional due to an unstable reactor. Midnight called for everyone to gather, announcing that it was time to decide the next event using the Wheel of Fortune. As the wheel spun and finally stopped, she revealed that the next challenge would be a cavalry battle. Students were to form groups of 3 or 4, with one person riding on top while the others acted as the horse. Points would be awarded based on placement, with first place earning a staggering 1 million points. Izumi gasped in shock, and the others echoed her disbelief. Kirishima and Denki realized that regardless of their previous placements, they could still aim for first place by defeating the person on top. Izumi felt the weight of everyone's gaze on her. She turned to Izuku, questioning whether he had anticipated this outcome. He admitted that he had considered it a possibility. When she asked why he hadn't warned her, he explained that it was a strategy and reminded her of her goal to become the #1 hero. He posed a challenge to her. Would she be able to survive? Determination replaced Izumi's fear as she declared her resolve. Izuku accepted the challenge, and she thought to herself that she might regret this later. Midnight announced that they had 15 minutes to form their teams, starting now. Izuku turned to see Shinso and Hexcss grinning at him. He sighed and laughed softly, agreeing to form a team with them. Suddenly, a voice interrupted, asking to join their group. It was Shota, who hesitantly sought their approval. Izuku welcomed her without hesitation, and Shinso and Hexcss expressed their agreement, noting that the more members, the better. Izuku introduced Shota as a member of Class 1A. Shinso introduced himself as Hitoshi Shinso from Class 1C, while Hexcss excitedly offered support equipment. Shota seemed unsure but was welcomed into the group. As they began to strategize, Shota suggested that Izuku should take the top position due to his reflexes, while she could take the front for offense and defense. She hesitated, unsure of their quirks, but encouraged them to share their ideas. As the final battle concluded, Izumi helped Izuku to the infirmary. Despite his initial refusal, he accepted her assistance after her persistent insistence. After walking for several minutes, they finally arrived at Recovery Girl's office. Upon entering, Recovery Girl promptly scolded Izumi for not measuring her power properly. Izumi felt a wave of frustration wash over her as she faced RG. She had just been reprimanded for her reckless behavior, and the weight of her actions pressed heavily on her. RG reminded her that she could have seriously harmed her brother, and Izumi struggled to find the right words to defend herself. Izuku, observing the situation, noted that he had encouraged RG to push Izumi to her limits. He understood the strength his sister possessed, but he wanted to gauge his own abilities in comparison. RG sighed, acknowledging Izuku's strength but also warning him about the terrifying power his sister wielded. As RG prepared to examine Izuku, the door swung open, and Shota rushed in, startling RG. Shota quickly apologized, and Izuku greeted her warmly. Shota approached Izuku, concerned for his well-being, but he reassured her that he was fine and questioned her faith in his strength. Shota expressed her belief in him but also pointed out Izumi's shortcomings. Izumi, feeling the weight of their words, sank deeper into her chair, overwhelmed by a sense of defeat. Shota turned back to Izuku, relieved to see he was okay, and reminded him to be cautious in his endeavors. Izuku chuckled, confident in his abilities and determined to keep his promise of a duel with Shota. As Shota prepared to leave, RG expressed her relief at Izuku's recovery, recalling the distressing call she received from Toshinori about his condition. She reflected on how Izuku seemed to be growing closer to Izumi, building a bond of trust and respect through their rivalry, even as he struggled with his frustrations. Outside the office, Izumi confronted Shota, teasing her about their newfound connection. Shota, flustered, insisted that they were just becoming friends. As they walked down the hall, Izumi noted how comfortable Izuku seemed with Shota, acknowledging her own shortcomings in connecting with him. Shota complimented Izumi for her efforts, but Izumi wished she could have done more to support her and Shoto during their difficult times. Shota encouraged her to focus on the future rather than the past. The conversation shifted as Izumi playfully probed Shota about her feelings for Izuku, leading to an unexpected confession from Shota about her long-standing affection for him. Izumi smiled at her best friend, wishing her luck in pursuing her feelings. Shota, with a teasing smirk, turned the question back to Izumi, leaving her momentarily speechless. Time passed, and the competition for third place concluded with Bakugo narrowly defeating Momo. The moment for the medal ceremony arrived, and excitement filled the air as All Might made a grand entrance. He announced the winners, with Izumi taking first place, Izuku in second, and Bakugo in third. All Might praised Bakugo for his potential and then turned to Izuku, commending him for proving that one could be extraordinary without a quirk. Izuku felt a swell of pride, knowing his parents would be proud of his achievements. As the chapter came to a close, Izuku and Izumi arrived at school, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead after their interviews with the journalists. They both attended their classes, but just before Izuku entered his classroom, the principal's voice came through the intercom, calling for him. Nizu announced that Izuku Midoriya should report to the principal's office. Izuku felt a wave of disbelief wash over him. Suddenly, the door burst open, and Mei jumped in front of him, startling him. Mei asked if Izuku was in trouble and what he had done. Izuku, taken aback, assured her that he was unaware of any wrongdoing. Mei seemed skeptical but accepted his response. Izuku decided to head to the principal's office, instructing Mei to inform Power Loader that Nizu had called him. Mei wished him good luck as he walked away, pondering what could have prompted the principal's summons. Upon reaching the office, Izuku knocked on the door. Nizu welcomed him inside, and Izuku greeted him with a polite good morning. Nizu congratulated Izuku for placing second in the sports festival, acknowledging it as a significant achievement. Izuku thanked him, surprised to learn that it was the first time a student from the support course had ranked so high. Nizu noted that even Eraserhead had only come in third during his time. Nizu expressed admiration for Izuku's performance, especially considering he was quirkless. This led to a new possibility in Nizu's mind. He then proposed transferring Izuku to the hero course as soon as possible. Izuku's eyes widened in disbelief, and his hands clenched into fists as he processed the offer. He questioned why he hadn't been given the chance to join earlier, expressing his frustration. Nizu sighed, understanding Izuku's anger. He explained that they had been cautious based on the description All Might provided. Izuku interrupted, asserting that All Might was not his father. Nizu acknowledged that if they had known about Izuku's skills, they would have considered him for the hero course. Izuku challenged Nizu's assumptions, arguing that one should not judge based on appearances. He believed there could be quirkless individuals more capable of being heroes than some with powers. Nizu admitted that he had considered this but emphasized the risks involved in the hero profession. Izuku countered, stating that true heroes act despite the dangers, even without powers. Nizu asked why Izuku didn't pursue becoming a hero himself. Izuku shook his head, expressing doubt about his ability to be that kind of hero. He revealed his desire to help those with the hearts of heroes, especially the quirkless, and to give them a voice in society. Nisa found this ambition commendable and agreed to hear Izuku's thoughts on making a better world. Later, in Class 1A, Aizawa informed the students that they would soon be going on internships and needed to choose their hero names. The students cheered, but Aizawa warned them to choose wisely, as midnight would ensure their names were fitting. As Aizawa fell asleep, midnight took over, and the students began presenting their names. Some struggled, particularly Shota and Izumi. Izumi asked Shota if he had a name yet, but he admitted that none of them felt right. Izumi suggested they seek advice from someone, and Midnight agreed to this idea. Meanwhile, Izuku was focused on improving the jet boots he had used during the festival when Power Loader called for him. He looked up to see Izumi standing there, which irritated him. However, when he noticed Shota was with her, his expression softened. Izuku reminded them that they were in class and questioned why they needed his help with their hero names. Izumi explained that none of their choices convinced them. Izuku teased them about finally using their brains, and Izumi responded with a hint of embarrassment. Then turned to Shota, suggesting that he choose a hero name that represented his quirk. When asked if his brother had chosen a name, Shota revealed that he had picked Shoto. Izuku stared blankly at her, acknowledging the unoriginality of the choice. He encouraged them to brainstorm together. How to represent the nature of your quirk? Izuku thought for a moment. He suggested, Temperate Hero, Ice Flame. Shota responded positively, expressing her appreciation with a smile. Izuku continued, mentioning that for the baked potato, they needed something that represented her quirk, proposing Charged Hero, Electra. Izumi found it appealing and asked about the name. Izuku explained that it was derived from the Greek word for electron, emphasizing her energetic nature. Izumi liked the name and thanked him. Izuku then mentioned he needed to get back to his work. Izumi apologized for bothering him, and Shota thanked him for his help. Izuku waved goodbye and returned to his class, closing the door behind him. Shota chuckled softly, remarking on the baked potato comment. Izumi, surprised, noted that Izuku often teased her. She reflected on how he seemed to channel his frustrations toward her, feeling she deserved it for her past actions. Still, she was amazed by his cleverness, recalling a time he called her a fried banana. Shota laughed at her blonde hair, prompting Izumi to protest that it wasn't funny. Shota defended his laughter, recalling another time Izuku had compared her to the Walmart version of Cinderella, and made a humorous remark about her intelligence. At that point, Shota couldn't contain his laughter any longer, causing Izumi to react with mock indignation, her eyes glistening with comedic tears. Despite her protests, Shota continued to laugh, and they made their way back to class. Time passed, and Izuku sat at his desk, engrossed in a book during history class with Cementos. Suddenly, Power Loader entered, interrupting the lesson. He asked for Midoriya, and Cementos called for him. Izuku stood up and walked out, where Power Loader handed him an envelope. Curious, Izuku inquired about its contents. Power Loader explained that the support course would be going on internships with various businesses and urged him to open the envelope. As Izuku read the letter, his eyes widened in disbelief. The CEO of Cater Industries, Xavier von Cater, wanted to see him. Power Loader confirmed the news, and Izuku was left in shock. Cater Industries was a major player in industrial and electronic development worldwide. Power Loader emphasized that it was a golden opportunity and asked if he would accept it. Izuku, filled with determination, replied that he would. Izuku stood outside the massive corporate buildings of Cater Industries, his eyes wide as he admired the impressive structure. He quickly snapped back to reality, realizing he was running late. He entered the building, where he was greeted by a bustling atmosphere. Men and women in formal attire moved about, some carrying documents while others were engaged in phone calls, just as one would expect from the headquarters of one of the largest companies in the world. Izuku approached the reception desk, where a friendly receptionist greeted him. He introduced himself, stating that he had been instructed to come. The receptionist, excited to meet him, led him to an elevator, assuring him that the boss was eager to see him and that they were at his full disposal if he needed anything. Izuku politely declined, not wanting to take advantage of their hospitality. Once the elevator doors opened, the receptionist guided him to a door and knocked. An elderly man opened it, and the receptionist announced Izuku's arrival. The man introduced himself as Enrico, the boss's personal butler, and invited Izuku inside. Inside the office, Izuku saw Zabier sitting behind a large desk. Zabier stood to greet him, expressing his pleasure at meeting Izuku. He complimented Izuku's talent displayed during the sports festival and invited him to take a seat. As they sat down, Zabier mentioned that he had also seen Izuku's recent interview and agreed with his views. Izuku was surprised to learn that Zabier was quirkless as well, despite his biography stating he had an analysis quirk. Zabier explained that he hid his true nature due to the bias against quirkless individuals in the business world. He praised Izuku for challenging that bias and offered him a chance to make a significant impact. Izuku accepted the offer, and Zabier took him on a tour of the headquarters, showing him the various facilities available to him. Zabier explained that Izuku would have access to the best workshops and engineers, and that he would be the center of attention at the upcoming Cater Expo. Izuku was eager to get started and understood that he needed to present a list of projects for approval. Zabier mentioned that the board of directors was still skeptical but encouraged Izuku to work on his jet boots, which were still incomplete. Izuku confirmed that he powered them with zero-point energy, prompting surprise from both Zabier and Enrico. Izuku demonstrated a small zero-point reactor he had created, impressing them with his ingenuity. After returning the reactor to his arm, Zabier led him to a large workshop filled with equipment. Suddenly, a man with a jetpack landed nearby, greeting Zabier enthusiastically. Zabier introduced him as Vlad Teak, who playfully welcomed Izuku and lightened the mood. With the introductions made, Izuku felt a sense of excitement about the opportunities ahead of him at Cater Industries. "Nice to meet you." Izuku Midoriya introduced himself, and Vlad, though quite young, showcased an impressive intellect, having worked with the team for 7 years since he was 15. Izuku found this incredible. Vlad expressed his excitement, asking if Izuku had a quirk. When Izuku revealed he was quirkless, Vlad's eyes lit up, and he embraced Izuku with enthusiasm, exclaiming that they would get along well as partners in quirklessness. He invited Izuku to join him for some fun. Zabier and Enrico observed the interaction as they left the room. Enrico expressed concern about Vlad's behavior, but Zabier reassured him that despite Vlad's unique personality, he was brilliant, and great minds often thought alike. Enrico remarked that he believed Vlad was more mad than brilliant, to which Zabier noted the remarkable coincidence of those two traits. 3 days passed since Izuku began working at Cater Industries, and he had formed a friendly bond with Vlad, discovering they had more in common than he initially thought. After a long day, Izuku entered Zabier's office, now night. He informed Zabier that he had finished the boots and wanted to test them outside. Zabier encouraged him to take his time and enjoy the beautiful night in Hosu. Outside the headquarters, Izuku prepared to test his new jet boots, eager to fly around Hosu City. He also brought along some of his gadgets, knowing Izumi was somewhere in the city. Once ready, he stood up, thinking it was time to see if everything worked. He pressed a button on the computer installed in his arm, igniting the boots, and he began to ascend rapidly, reaching a height of 10 kilometers. Realizing he needed to adjust his speed, he started to descend. As he moved down, he noticed yellow and red lights through the clouds. Curiosity piqued. He flew toward them and discovered they were flames coming from Hosu. Accelerating, he descended further, witnessing chaos as heroes evacuated civilians from the city center, where something ominous was happening. Izuku decided to investigate but was interrupted by a screech from the side. He turned to see a flying Nomu approaching him. The Nomu attempted to grab him, but Izuku countered, using his metal arm to hold it back. However, the Nomu overpowered his left arm. Utilizing the strength of his metal arm, Izuku twisted the Nomu's arm until it released its grip. He then delivered a punch with his metal arm, sending the Nomu crashing onto the roof of a nearby building. Realizing the danger, Izuku thought about the implications of the Nomu's presence and suspected the League of Villains was involved. The Nomu screeched again and charged at him. Izuku skillfully dodged, grabbing the Nomu's arm, spinning in the air, and throwing it to the ground. The Nomu quickly regained its footing and flew back at him. Izuku took out his taser gun, increased its power, and shot it at the Nomu, which fell to the ground, unable to rise again. Izuku examined the defeated Nomu, contemplating why the League would be in Hosu. He decided to focus on finding Izumi, activating the GPS he had installed in his computer. He spotted her location in an alley and recalled that the hero killer had been last seen in Hosu. Concerned that they might have sent the hero killer after her, he activated his jet boots and flew away. In the alley, Izumi, Shoto, and Tenya lay immobilized on the ground, while Native was pinned against a wall. Shota was also on the floor, blades piercing her hands, with the hero killer standing over her. Stain declared that they would all die for the improvement of society, urging them to be grateful for their sacrifice. Shota, filled with fear, closed her eyes, accepting her fate and saying her goodbyes in her mind. Suddenly, a clank echoed, and Shota opened her eyes in shock to see Izuku standing above her, having blocked the knife with his metal arm. Stain was taken aback by Izuku's sudden appearance. Izuku seized Stain's arm with his other hand and punched him with his metal arm. Although Stain blocked the blow, he was still sent flying. Izuku pressed the attack, jumping towards Stain and landing a solid punch that sent him further away. Turning to Shota, Izuku asked if she was okay and offered to help with the swords. Shota urged him not to worry about her and to keep his focus on Stain. Izuku quickly turned back to face Stain, who was regaining his composure. He assessed the situation, noting the immobilized Izumi, Tenya, Shoto, and Native, questioning how strong Stain must be to have defeated them all. Izumi called out to Izuku, who responded with a teasing remark about her position. Izumi defended herself, insisting it wasn't her fault. Izuku was warned that the enemy's quirk could paralyze him if he liked his blood, so he remained cautious. He understood the gravity of the situation, realizing that even a small cut could lead to disaster. He hoped that all his training in dodging would pay off. Stain approached, recognizing Izuku. He acknowledged Izuku's reputation and noble beliefs, claiming that he had the heart of a hero. Izuku, however, felt differently about that characterization. Stain pointed out the corruption in the system and questioned why Izuku was intervening if he wanted change. He believed that the so-called fake heroes needed to be removed for new, better ones to emerge. Izuku firmly stated that he could not allow Stain to kill them. Stain expressed regret that they had to fight, insisting that he wouldn't kill Izuku but would not let him obstruct his mission. Izuku remained on guard, knowing he had to be careful. Suddenly, Stain charged at Izuku. In response, Izuku fired his taser gun, but Stain dodged the blast and closed the distance quickly. Stain slashed at Izuku's metal arm, not cutting through but knocking the taser gun away. Izuku ducked under Stain's elbow and transformed a metal stick into a katana. He slashed at Stain, who blocked the attack with his own sword. Using the strength of his metal arm, Izuku pushed Stain back. Izuku realized that fighting in such a confined space was challenging, especially with others nearby. He needed to push Stain out of the alley. He charged again, slashing at Stain, who blocked once more. Izuku used his strength to push Stain back further, then opened his metal hand, releasing a blast that sent Stain flying out of the alley. Izuku followed Stain outside, where his friends were watching anxiously. Izumi expressed her determination that her brother would not die, believing in his strength despite the danger he faced. Shoto and Tenya shared their concerns but ultimately decided to trust in Izuku's abilities. They had learned from past mistakes and were resolved to support him. Outside, Izuku activated his jet boots and fired blasts at Stain, who dodged and threw a knife that damaged one of the propellers, forcing Izuku to land. Despite this setback, Izuku continued to fire at Stain while maintaining distance. Stain moved swiftly, closing in on Izuku. Their blades clashed, and Stain, realizing he couldn't win, stepped aside and swung his sword. Izuku attempted to dodge but felt a cut on his cheek. Knowing the danger of Stain liking his blood, Izuku reacted quickly, dropping his sword to use his metal arm to punch through Stain's blade, breaking it in two. He activated a small flamethrower in his hand, forcing Stain to retreat. After turning off the flamethrower, Izuku released smoke from his hand, obscuring the area. He donned goggles with thermal vision and entered the smoke, searching for Stain. Believing he was hidden, kept his guard up. Suddenly, he felt a metallic force strike his head, sending him to the ground. A metallic hand touched his face, delivering a small electrical shock. As the smoke cleared, Stain saw Izuku pointing his blade at him. Stain questioned why Izuku defended the heroes, claiming they were products of the corrupt system they both despised. Izuku countered that they were products, and to eliminate a weed one must cut out the root, not just the leaves. Stain insisted that the leaves had to go as well, but Izuku argued that humans were not mere leaves. He believed in the potential for change and learning, asserting that if Stain thought they couldn't change, he was denying humanity's capacity for growth. Stain challenged him, asking what if they didn't change. Izuku replied that life constantly teaches, and it is only when one refuses to learn that they stagnate. He expressed a desire to see how much someone could learn and what sacrifices they would make for change. If they could learn from their mistakes, it would be worth it. If not, then they were a waste of human life. If one refuses to see the possibility of change, then they are also part of the problem. Stain believed that change was impossible, but Izuku held a different perspective. He felt that to accept a fate of inevitable decline would mean surrendering to despair. He refused to believe that there was no room for growth, that this was the pinnacle of their existence. Stain acknowledged their shared disdain for the system, yet their views diverged significantly. Izuku's perspective intrigued Stain, who expressed a desire to learn and witness the potential for change. He wanted to see if Izuku's beliefs could be proven right. Izuku, however, had to ensure Stain's departure was managed carefully. Stain accepted his fate, stating that being captured by Izuku would be an honor. Izuku agreed but felt it would be strange to leave Stain conscious. With a heavy sigh, Izuku prepared to take action. Later, Izuku returned to the alley with Stain tied up and unconscious. Shoto, Izumi, and Tenya were finally able to rise, though Native remained unconscious. As they gathered, Izumi called out to Shota, and they rushed to his side. Shota reassured them, but Izumi couldn't help but worry, noting the swords piercing his hands. Tenya joined them, and Izumi insisted on removing the swords. Izuku intervened, stating that he would handle it to avoid any further injury. He assured Izumi that he was capable and prepared her to assist by providing a handkerchief for Shota to bite down on. Shota received bandages from Izuku, who instructed him to be ready for when he removed the swords. As Izuku carefully extracted the first sword, Shota fought back tears and the urge to scream. Izumi placed the handkerchief in Shota's mouth just in time. After what felt like an eternity, Izuku set the sword aside and quickly bandaged Shota's hand to minimize blood loss and restrict movement. With the first hand treated, Izuku prepared to address the other. Despite their anticipation, the process was still daunting. After another long moment, he completed the task and warned Shota that it would hurt for a while, advising her to keep her hands still. Shota accepted this, reassuring Izuku that it wasn't his fault and that it had to be done eventually. Izumi expressed curiosity about how Izuku knew what to do, to which he replied that it was always best to be prepared. As Izuku prepared to call for help, they were startled by the arrival of Gran Torino, Endeavor, and other heroes, who looked at the restrained hero killer and then at the group. Gran Torino asked for an explanation of the situation. The incident in Hosu was all over the news. The infamous League of Villains had attacked again, causing chaos throughout the city. Meanwhile, the hero killer Stain had been captured by the authorities. In a city hospital, Izumi, Tenya, and the Todorokis lay in different beds, recovering from the aftermath of the battle. Tenya expressed his remorse, apologizing for his actions and seeking forgiveness. Izumi reassured him, emphasizing the importance of friendship and support during tough times. Shota agreed, stating that he would never abandon a friend in need. Shoto added a cautionary note, urging Tenya not to put himself in such dangerous situations again. Tenya thanked them for their support and promised that he would not let such a thing happen again. Shoto encouraged him to ensure that they were all strong enough to face challenges together in the future. Shota reflected on how Shoto had become more open since the sports festival and had grown closer to Izumi, feeling grateful to Izuku for that change. Tenya inquired about Izumi's brother, wanting to thank him and apologize. Izumi mentioned that he was likely with the police, having overheard him talking about it. Shota noted that her brothers seemed to be fine, only suffering minor injuries. They all expressed relief at this news. Tenya complimented Izumi's brother, marveling at his strength despite lacking a quirk. Izumi, however, felt unworthy of comparison and insisted that her brother was the better of the two. Shoto and Shota encouraged her, reminding her of her own strengths and urging her not to doubt herself. Izumi then confided that she had something from her family that she believed should belong to her brother, but she was unsure how to give it to him. Shoto encouraged her to try, emphasizing that she would never know unless she took the chance. Izumi felt reassured by his words. As Izumi stood to hug Shoto, they were interrupted by Izuku's arrival. He asked if he had interrupted anything, and Izumi quickly denied it. Shota expressed relief at seeing Izuku safe, and he reciprocated by checking on her injuries. He gently held her hands, ensuring he didn't hurt her, which surprised her. He expressed his happiness that she wasn't more seriously injured and urged her to take care of herself. Tenya attempted to speak to Izuku, but he was cut off. Izuku reassured him that he had nothing to apologize for, explaining that emotions are a natural part of being human and should be used to motivate oneself. He warned that allowing emotions to overwhelm him could lead to losing himself. Tenya thanked Izuku for his wise words, to which Izuku humbly replied that it was simply common sense. Shota playfully teased him about his intelligence, reminding him of his impressive inventions. Izuku shrugged it off, noting the challenges he faced. As they shared a light moment, Izuku stepped out of the room, returning with a briefcase containing medical prototypes from Cater Industries. He explained that they would help the group heal faster, and the hospital staff had been informed. Tenya expressed gratitude to Mr. Cater for his generosity. Izuku mentioned that the police and heroes would be visiting to discuss the incident, prompting a collective groan from the group. He reassured them that he had not faced any consequences since he hadn't used his quirk during the incident. As he prepared to leave, Izumi called out to him, asking to speak privately. In the hallway, Izuku and Izumi locked eyes. She took a deep breath and expressed her desire to pass one for all to him, despite knowing he had rejected it before. Izuku was taken aback, reiterating that he didn't want or need her power. Izumi insisted that he could achieve greater things with it than she could, but Izuku remained firm, stating that he was not the type to engage in reckless heroics. Izumi continued to plead, believing he could find a way to use the power effectively. This quirk should have been yours from the beginning. Izuku reflected on the weight of the power he had inherited. He considered how, if it had been passed down to his younger self, he might have become a hero burdened by ideals too great for him, ultimately crushed by the pressure. In a way, he felt grateful for the circumstances that had led him to this moment. He had discovered a better use for the quirk. He turned to Izumi and asked if she wanted to be a hero. She nodded eagerly, affirming her desire to save people and be the greatest hero there ever was. Izuku urged her to take the power, learn to handle it, and stop making him ashamed of sharing a chromosome with her. With that, he turned and walked away, adding that if he had a quirk, he wouldn't have been able to do the things he did without facing consequences. As Izuku departed, Izumi watched him, a small smile forming on her face. She thought to herself that even if it was just a joke, he had trusted her with one for all. She felt a surge of determination, realizing that she had to follow his advice. In the League of Villains hideout, Nana expressed her frustration at their recent defeat, questioning how it was possible. All for One urged her to calm down and suggested they try again. Nana blamed a green-haired boy from the festival for their failure, revealing her anger toward him. All for One found the mention of the boy intriguing and decided to keep an eye on him. Meanwhile, Izuku walked through the hospital, lost in thought until he was called by All Might. The former hero approached him, concerned about his well-being. Izuku questioned All Might's concern, reminding him not to call him son. All Might insisted he cared and vowed to protect him from harm. Izuku challenged him about his frequent tardiness, recalling how All Might was once the great hero who would do anything to save others. After a tense moment, Izuku walked away, leaving All Might behind. Izuku made his way to Cater Industries, where Zabier had requested his presence. Upon arrival, he greeted Zabier, who asked about his well-being and the recent events. Izuku reassured him that he was fine and shared that the police had merely warned him about dangerous situations, noting that Endeavor would receive the credit for the incident. Zabier acknowledged the embarrassment of the police, remarking that it would have been a great opportunity for Izuku to gain popularity, but Izuku clarified that capturing the villain had never been his intention. Zabier then inquired about the jet boots, to which Izuku proudly reported that they worked perfectly, being twice as fast and able to reach 4 times the height of the prototypes. Zabier expressed his satisfaction and invited Izuku to join him in a board meeting that was about to take place. Izuku was surprised but agreed, mentioning that the boots had been damaged during the battle with Stain. Zabier reassured him that they would be fine and urged him to hurry. As they entered the meeting room, Izuku saw the directors gathered around the table. Zabier thanked everyone for attending and explained that he wanted to showcase some of the developments made by his intern, hoping to address any doubts they had. He presented the jet boots and the zero-point reactor, asking Izuku to explain the improvements. Izuku shared the enhancements, noting the increased speed and height capabilities. The directors murmured among themselves, with one asking about the energy requirements for the boots. Izuku introduced the zero-point reactor as the power source, prompting astonishment from the directors who had been trying to develop it for years. Zabier urged everyone to calm down, emphasizing Izuku's value. Izuku offered to conduct a test run, but another director stated that the development of the zero-point reactor was proof enough of his capabilities. Zabier then asked the directors to raise their hands if they supported Izuku continuing his internship beyond its official end. Every hand went up in approval. With that, Izuku officially became part of the team. As they exited the meeting room, Enrico congratulated Izuku on his acceptance, and Izuku expressed his gratitude. Zabier praised him, confident that he would contribute greatly to their efforts and humanity as a whole. Izuku appreciated the compliment and mentioned that his mask was no longer uncomfortable. It had been more than a year since the accident, and Izuku had grown accustomed to the mask he wore. Zabier expressed his belief that Izuku could develop a better system that didn't rely on it. Izuku acknowledged the thought but mentioned that the mask didn't bother him much, and any change would require surgery to adjust the tubes inside him for food intake. Zabier then proposed a reward for Izuku's efforts, revealing that he had consulted top scientists to create a new system that utilized nanopumps instead of the mask. Izuku considered the offer, realizing that it could significantly improve his situation, and ultimately accepted. During the remaining days of Izuku's school internship, he underwent the surgery. Both All Might and Inko supported his decision, and top surgeons were brought in to perform the complex procedure under the guidance of the scientists who developed the new respiratory system. The surgery was challenging and lasted a total of 25 hours, but they succeeded. Izuku woke up an hour after the surgery, feeling weak. Izumi and Shota visited him, helping him as the effects of the anesthesia began to fade. Inko and All Might also came to see him, though he was still asleep. Shinso and Hatsum dropped by as well, and despite Shota's protests, they took some photos of him in his semi-conscious state for future teasing. After nearly a full day, the effects of the anesthesia finally wore off. When Izuku opened his eyes again, he was more aware of his surroundings. He noticed Shota resting her head on his bed and Izumi sitting in a chair across from him, both seemingly asleep. Remembering what had happened, he reached up to his face and felt the absence of the mask, realizing he was breathing freely. Just then, Shota stirred and opened her eyes, spotting him. Shota jumped up and hugged him, and to her surprise, Izuku returned the embrace with his flesh arm. Izumi woke up from Shota's sudden movement and joined in the hug. After stepping back, Shota asked how he felt, to which Izuku replied that it felt a bit strange. Izumi inquired if he preferred the mask, but Izuku clarified that he had simply grown accustomed to it. The doctors had suggested he try eating, and Shota presented a bowl of katsudon, claiming Izumi had mentioned it was his favorite. Izuku expressed his gratitude, feeling as though it had been ages since he had enjoyed it. Shota reminded him that they were indebted to him for the injection he had provided, which had helped them recover quickly. As Izuku ate, he noticed Shota staring at him. When he asked if something was wrong, she commented on how similar they looked despite being half-siblings. Izuku jokingly lamented the insult, prompting laughter from both Shota and Izumi, who playfully teased him. Just then, a doctor entered the room, introducing himself as the one in charge of Izuku's care. He requested that the girls step outside while he conducted some tests. Izumi and Shota waved goodbye as they left, allowing the doctor to proceed with the examinations. Izuku spent a few more days in the hospital, and his recovery was surprisingly swift. Shota and Izumi visited frequently, along with Shinso and Hatsum, providing him with much-needed company during his time confined to the bed. Finally, after 5 days, he was discharged. Eager to stretch his legs after being bedridden, Izuku took a walk through the streets of Hosu. As he strolled, he heard a commotion coming from an alley. Peeking in, he saw a young teen with onyx eyes and black hair, bruised and surrounded by 3 thugs. The thugs were demanding respect, and the teen defiantly refused, provoking them further. One thug transformed his hand into crystal and struck the teen, who struggled against them. Izuku felt compelled to intervene. He approached and asked what was happening. The thug warned him to leave, but Izuku stood his ground. When the thug charged at him, Izuku caught the punch with his metal arm and quickly countered, knocking the thug out with a well-placed punch. The second thug, covered in spikes, charged at him next, but Izuku ducked under the punch, preparing for the next move. He grabbed one of the thug's legs and positioned himself behind him, pressing forward with his shoulder and bringing the thug down to the ground. Izuku quickly rose and stepped on the thug's head, rendering him unconscious. The third thug's arm transformed into vines that extended toward Izuku. Izuku seized the arms and tied them into a blind knot before walking toward the thug. Izuku asked how it felt to be defeated in such a ridiculous manner. The thug stammered in response before being knocked out. Izuku then approached the teen. He inquired if the teen was all right. The teen replied that it was nothing and thanked Izuku for his help. Suddenly, the teen recognized him as Izuku Midoriya. Izuku confirmed his identity, and the teen expressed his admiration, stating that if it weren't for Izuku, he might not have had the courage to stand up for himself. Izuku was surprised and asked for the teen's name. The teen introduced himself as Sho Jitsuna. Izuku then asked why Jitsuna had confronted the thugs. Jitsuna explained that the thugs frequently came to his neighborhood, taking what they wanted as if it were rent, and he had finally had enough. Izuku acknowledged that one must consider the chances of winning in a fight, but he admired Jitsuna's bravery in standing up to those who wronged him. Jitsuna shared that he, too, was quirkless and that Izuku's actions had inspired others like him to feel empowered and treated better than before. Izuku asked about Jitsuna's past, and Jitsuna revealed that his parents had abandoned him at the age of 4 because he lacked a quirk. For the past 15 years, he had been struggling to survive on the streets, trying to stay on the right path despite the challenges. Izuku recognized Jitsuna as a good person and asked what he would do if given a chance to work honestly. Jitsuna replied that he would seize that opportunity, as it was all he desired. Izuku offered to help him, but Jitsuna hesitated, concerned about taking advantage of Izuku's kindness. Izuku reassured him that helping those in need was a natural thing to do and that he wanted to support all quirkless individuals. If he couldn't help Jitsuna, how could he truly make a difference? Jitsuna expressed his gratitude, and Izuku encouraged him to come along. In an unknown location, a figure inquired if everything was proceeding as planned. Another figure confirmed that the politicians were being pressured effectively. The first figure mentioned needing more resources to continue expanding and asked if any efforts had been made to locate a certain man. The second figure reported that all assets had been mobilized, but no traces had been found, and they would have to wait for the next opportunity. The first figure acknowledged being informed about someone interesting and asked if they should keep an eye on him. The second figure confirmed they were already ahead of the game. The first figure expressed satisfaction with the progress and stated that soon, their plans would be set in motion. In Cater Industries headquarters, Zabier's office was filled with a sense of purpose as Izuku presented his report for the day. Zabier acknowledged Izuku's efficiency, noting how he had made up for the days missed due to his surgery. Izuku felt a newfound sense of freedom, relieved to be free from the constant reminder of his past trauma. Zabier inquired about his well-being, expressing concern that many would be traumatized after such an event. Izuku admitted that the initial days were tough, filled with anger rather than sadness. However, he found solace in designing and inventing, as well as training with Dan, which kept his mind occupied. Zabier pointed out that distractions can help with trauma, and Izuku agreed, revealing that his anger was largely directed at his guardians. Zabier reminded him that they were trying to connect with him, to which Izuku wondered how long that would last. Zabier reassured him that they would not give up easily. Izuku reflected on the struggle against something that seemed insurmountable, suggesting that one must either succumb to it or find a way around it. Zabier asked if bypassing it would earn his forgiveness, to which Izuku replied that forgiveness was not guaranteed, but he might be willing to overlook the past for the greater good. Zabier then shifted the conversation to Sho Jitsuna, the teenager Izuku had brought in. He shared that Sho was exceptionally intelligent, scoring 180 on an IQ test despite being illiterate. Izuku was impressed and agreed that placing him in a low-wage job would be a waste of his potential. Zabier revealed plans to tutor Sho, preparing him to be Izuku's right-hand man and bodyguard, emphasizing the need for protection once Izuku became famous. Izuku was surprised by the idea of needing a bodyguard but understood the risks involved. The conversation turned to the Cater Expo, which Izuku would be hosting. Zabier expressed confidence in Izuku's ability to impress everyone with his projects. Izuku was grateful for the trust placed in him but mentioned a special request from Principal Nizu that would consume a lot of his time. Zabier agreed to provide proof of his hosting role, knowing Nizu could be trusted. The following day, in Principal Nizu's office, Izuku expressed his need to postpone a task. Nizu reassured him that it was understandable and encouraged him to do his best. He promised to discuss with Power Loader about granting Izuku extra time during classes to work on his responsibilities for the Cater Expo. Thus began 3 weeks of intense work for Izuku. Power Loader allowed him to focus on his projects during class, and he dedicated himself fully to the Cater Expo, one of the largest events in the world. He often stayed late at the UA workshop, far from distractions, where his sister Izumi would wait for him, bringing dinner for both of them. Izumi occasionally tried to see what he was working on, but after an incident where she startled him, she learned to respect his focus and chose to train in the gym instead. 3 weeks later, at the mall, Shota discovered that Izuku would be the host of the Cater Expo. Izumi urged him to keep it a secret, fearing Izuku's reaction if he found out she had shared the news. Shota was surprised that Izuku had confided in her at all, but Izumi explained that he had been tired and more open that day. She had shared the news with their parents, which led to Izuku's frustration when he found out. Shota acknowledged that Cater Industries kept the host's identity a secret, and Izumi admitted that she had never been particularly interested in the Cater Expo, despite its significance as a showcase for the latest technologies. Some can even change the future drastically. Izumi observed Shota's enthusiasm for science fiction and asked if he really liked that sort of thing. Shota explained that he had been curious since childhood, sharing his love for exploring the cosmos, fighting aliens, and colonizing new planets. Izumi acknowledged that while she found it cool and would love to travel through the galaxy, she was more interested in other things. Curious about Shota's experiences, Izumi inquired if he had ever attended a Cater Expo. Shota revealed that his father had never taken him to see what he referred to as toys. Izumi then invited him to join her family for this year's expo, to which Shota responded with surprise and excitement. She reassured him that her brother Izuku would not be mad at him for coming along. With a sense of relief, Shota agreed to go, and Izumi felt confident he wouldn't turn down the opportunity. On the day of the expo, Zabier stood on stage delivering a speech while Izuku peeked through the curtains backstage. He noticed the presence of Old Man Dan and Nizu seated together, which made him uneasy. He also spotted All Might and realized that Izumi must have brought Shota with her. Taking a deep breath, he tried to calm himself, feeling nervous about the politicians and foreign representatives in attendance. Enrico approached Izuku and commented on his nervousness, noting that it was natural to feel that way in front of a large audience. He encouraged Izuku, reminding him that first impressions are based on appearance, and he looked good. Izuku appreciated the support, mentioning that he had even styled his hair for the occasion. As Zabier introduced him, Izuku prepared to step onto the stage. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers as he made his entrance. Zabier handed over the microphone, and Izuku greeted the audience, expressing his hope that they were enjoying the expo. He acknowledged the expectation for a lengthy speech but humorously noted that, as someone who used to watch from the audience, he knew they were eager to see the new inventions. The crowd laughed at his lightheartedness. Izuku then mentioned a protocol he was supposed to follow, pulling out a pamphlet but quickly dismissing it, much to the amusement of the audience. The director and Zabier exchanged glances, acknowledging that they had anticipated Izuku's spontaneous approach. Izuku continued, sharing a meaningful quote about the importance of learning and the dangers of stagnation. He reflected on the historical context of the Dark Ages and how society had flourished through the pursuit of knowledge. He expressed hope that the recent resurgence in research would lead to new discoveries and invited the audience to witness the fruits of that labor. As he spoke, a robot brought forth the inventions he had created. Shota and Izumi were amazed, with Shota exclaiming about the AI. Izuku introduced the AI, humorously naming it Deku due to a lack of creativity. He demonstrated its capabilities, showcasing how it could control the lights and his microphone, illustrating its intelligence and potential. The audience watched in awe as Izuku showcased his work, excited about the future of technology and innovation. So, Deku suggested they move on to the next part of the presentation, pondering what they should showcase next. Izuku, feeling a bit hesitant, mentioned that they had been inspired by a movie they watched recently. After the initial surprise, the crowd laughed at Izuku's playful antics. Izuku expressed his gratitude to Deku for his assistance, and they shared a high five before Deku returned to the stage. Izuku then transitioned to discussing their first advancements in the medical field. He introduced a syringe that appeared ordinary but contained millions of nanites designed to aid in wound healing, significantly reducing recovery time. Next, he presented a respiratory mask that could assist individuals with failing respiratory systems, such as those suffering from asthma. This mask functioned as an artificial respiratory system, and they were testing a newer version that would not require the mask to operate, which was showing promising results. Izuku then showcased a prosthetic arm, similar to his own, highlighting its advanced capabilities. This arm functioned just like a natural one, without the lag often found in traditional prosthetics, and could lift heavy objects effortlessly. He demonstrated its strength by lifting a nearby table with just the prosthetic. He continued by explaining that these prosthetics were lightweight and equipped with unique identification marks that acted as fingerprints. They were also developing prototypes for leg and eye prosthetics, and he was optimistic about their progress. Izuku then shifted focus to new technologies that Cater Industries believed would greatly benefit the police force and heroes. He introduced jet boots, which were easy to use and would assist the police in pursuing criminals, leveling the playing field against those with flying abilities. He also unveiled a taser gun capable of higher voltages, designed to neutralize electrokinetic quirks, allowing for quick restraint of dangerous individuals. He emphasized the importance of self-reliance, noting that while heroes are admirable, society had become overly dependent on them. He introduced the latest mech, the Griplay, designed to enhance police capabilities against powerful foes. This mech was equipped with various weapons and advanced armor, making it a formidable asset for maintaining safety in Japan. After 3 hours of the expo, Izuku expressed his gratitude for the audience's participation and wished everyone a safe night, concluding the 15th Cater Industries Expo with a memorable statement about the future. Following the event, Izuku stepped backstage, feeling overwhelmed and exhausted. Enrico approached him with a glass of water, and Izuku assured him he was just catching his breath. Enrico reassured him that feeling overwhelmed was normal for a first-time presenter and that he would adapt over time. Zabier then entered, praising Izuku for his impressive performance and noting that it would help elevate his reputation. He mentioned that some politicians had spoken favorably about him, which surprised Izuku. Zabier encouraged him to continue building on this positive impression. As Zabier and Enrico left for a press conference, Hatsum and Shinso entered the backstage area. They greeted Izuku enthusiastically, and Shinso made a playful reference to a famous character, prompting a light-hearted exchange between them. Hatsum teased Shinso about their quirks, and Izuku reflected on the pressure of his presentation, explaining that he had to keep the audience entertained. Shinso acknowledged Izuku's efforts, and Hatsum expressed her determination to surpass his achievements with her inventions. Izuku encouraged her, and they discussed their plans for the weekend, with Izuku looking forward to some much-needed rest. He hinted at good news coming Shinso's way soon, leaving him curious and excited. "Now, if you excuse me, I must go now." Hatsum reminded Izuku to remember them when he started meeting all the famous people. Izuku assured her that even if he wanted to forget, he couldn't. Hatsum's reaction was one of delight, while Shinso commented on the nice exchange. After a weekend where Izuku spent most of his time asleep, he found himself at Dan's dojo. Dan expressed his pride in Izuku's growth, to which Izuku responded with gratitude, acknowledging that he might not have made it this far without Dan's guidance. Dan clarified that he merely set Izuku on the right path, and the rest was up to him. Izuku pondered what he might be doing if things had turned out differently, joking that he could be taking over the world. They both laughed at the thought. Dan reminded Izuku of the theory of infinite universes, suggesting that perhaps there was a universe where Izuku was indeed a world conqueror. However, Dan emphasized the importance of focusing on the present. Izuku agreed, mentioning that he needed to practice his speech more, recalling how he almost fainted backstage. Dan reassured him that with experience, he would become accustomed to such situations and noted Izuku's natural talent. He urged Izuku to get ready, as Principal Nizu had informed him that Izuku would be starting something new. Later at UA, Class 1A exited their classroom, and Aizawa led them to the training grounds. Izumi expressed surprise at the exam, while Shota shared his own unexpected reaction. Momo believed it was a test of morality, and Tenya noted that it was normal for them to evaluate their intentions. Tokoyami remarked that they couldn't allow someone with a dark soul to be a hero. Shoto thought about how little they knew. Bakugo dismissed the test as unnecessary, and Kaminari joked about Bakugo's likely villainous answers. Siro warned Kaminari to be careful, fearing Bakugo's reaction, which prompted Bakugo to demand clarification. Tenya reminded everyone to watch their language, and Aizawa called for silence. Once quiet, Aizawa informed them that they would be tested again, but this time it would be different. He instructed them to put on their hero costumes and meet him at the training ground. A few minutes later, Class 1A stood before Aizawa, who was ready to lead them through the indoor training ground. As Aizawa revealed Izuku as the one directing the class, the students reacted with surprise. Aizawa explained that Izuku had also created the morality tests, which Tenya acknowledged as a reason for their quality. Bakugo questioned why Izuku was chosen, and Aizawa asserted that he was the most qualified for the lesson. Izuku called Bakugo over, and when Bakugo hesitated, Izuku reminded him that he was effectively the teacher for the day, and grades depended on him. Bakugo reluctantly agreed to participate in a sparring match. They prepared for 3 rounds, with Aizawa as the mediator. Bakugo boasted about his strength, while Izuku reminded him of their previous encounter at the sports festival. As Bakugo charged at Izuku, he unleashed small explosions, but Izuku sidestepped and countered with a punch, sending Bakugo back slightly. Izuku explained that provoking an enemy could lead them to lose their composure. Izuku then threw a small grenade-like object that released smoke, obscuring the area. Bakugo reacted by exploding everything around him, but soon found himself restrained and pushed to the ground by Izuku. As the smoke cleared, Izuku held Bakugo down, stating that even in chaos, there is opportunity. Aizawa declared Izuku the winner of the first round. After allowing Bakugo to rise, Izuku shared that one should never speak to an enemy in battle unless it serves a purpose. Aizawa confirmed Izuku's victory for the second round. Bakugo slowly got back up, and Izuku reminded him that after a victory, one should adapt to circumstances rather than repeat tactics. For the final round, Bakugo removed his gauntlets and used his explosions to maneuver around Izuku, trying to confuse him. He then prepared his signature move, Howitzer, and launched himself at Izuku, creating a massive explosion. As Bakugo tried to regain his balance, he realized the intensity of the battle was far from over. Suddenly, something grabbed his arms and pressed them against his chest, pushing him down towards the floor with Izuku's metal arm. Izuku reflected on the situation, noting that the opportunity to defeat the enemy often comes from the enemy themselves. He questioned the wisdom of announcing one's moves before executing them, as it only allowed the opponent to prepare a response. Aizawa declared Midoriya the winner, and the others expressed their admiration for his skills. Ojiro acknowledged that Izuku was on a different level, while Uraraka noted that he had won against Bakugo without a scratch. Mina and Kirishima praised his manliness, agreeing wholeheartedly. Izuku shared his thoughts on strategy in battle, emphasizing that true victory comes not just from strength but from knowledge and timing. He instructed Kirishima, Todoroki, Izumi, and Tenya to join him at Training Ground Beta, while Aizawa took the rest to the monitor room. At Training Ground Beta, in front of the building where Class 1A had their first lesson with All Might, Izuku explained their mission. They were to capture him while he attempted to capture them. He gave them 10 minutes to prepare. After the time was up, Izuku contemplated his opponent's likely strategies. He deduced that Izumi and Shoto would be positioned at the top, with Shoto as a last line of defense and Tenya positioned below to alert the others. With a plan in mind, he took out a hook gun and shot it to the top of the building, climbing up and entering through the ventilation system. Navigating through the vents, he reached the last room and spotted Izumi alone. He quickly subdued her, covering her mouth and handcuffing her before retreating back into the ventilation system, leaving the door ajar. Shota rushed into the room, alarmed to find Izumi tied up. As he looked up at the open vent, he was suddenly caught off guard and subdued as well. Izuku stood over him, sharing his thoughts on the importance of knowing when to fight and when to avoid conflict. He noted that taking on two opponents at once would have been unwise, as not all victories come from direct confrontation. Izuku descended to the floor below, searching for Todoroki. When he found him, Shoto expressed disbelief at Izuku's success against Tenya and Kirishima, vowing to stop him. Izuku reminded him of his ability to counter Shoto's ice and warned that engaging him could endanger Izumi and Shota. Recognizing the truth in Izuku's words, Shoto lowered his guard, allowing Izuku to use his taser gun on him, quickly handcuffing him afterward. Izuku understood that convincing an enemy of the futility of their attack could diminish their resolve, and he was aware that time was of the essence. As Izuku moved through the vents, he noticed Tenya and Kirishima searching for him. He followed Tenya's movements until he saw an opportunity. Jumping down, he tackled Tenya, knocking him unconscious with a swift strike and securing him in HNDCFFS. Izuku reflected on the importance of preparation and strategy in battle. He then set out to find Kirishima. When they finally encountered each other, Kirishima hardened his defenses, prompting Izuku to feign fear and run in the opposite direction. Kirishima, thinking he had the upper hand, chased after him. As Kirishima turned a corner, he was caught off guard by a powerful punch from Izuku, which cracked his defenses. Izuku noted that sometimes appearing weak when one is strong can be a strategic advantage. Kirishima took a stance, confident in his own strength, but Izuku countered easily, pushing aside Kirishima's punches and landing another blow that incapacitated him. With Kirishima on the ground, Izuku handcuffed him, concluding that deception is a vital part of fighting, turning one's weaknesses into strengths. Izuku acknowledged that while his flesh arm might not possess the same strength, it certainly offered greater speed. Aizawa announced that Midoriya was the winner. Izuku then directed his attention to the camera, expressing his hope that everyone grasped the lesson's essence, emphasizing that true learning comes from discovering answers independently. He encouraged everyone to prepare for the next class. In the observation room, everyone, including Aizawa, was left in awe, their mouths agape. Izuku stood in front of the entire Class 1A after the class had ended. He informed them that Mr. Aizawa would provide recordings of their training, and he needed them to write an essay analyzing the flaws they displayed during the battle. Tenya asked if there was a word limit, to which Izuku replied that as long as they explained their points clearly, he didn't mind. He then dismissed the class. As the students began to chat among themselves, Kirishima expressed his frustration, noting that they hadn't stood a chance against Izuku. Shoto agreed, stating that it hadn't even felt like a battle. Tenya lamented that they were doomed from the start. Mina remarked on Izuku's strength, while Momo pointed out that he had simply outsmarted everyone, taking a different approach rather than relying on brute force. Denki compared the situation to a game of checkers versus a complex game of 4D chess, and Shota expressed his admiration for Izuku's abilities. Izumi proudly acknowledged her brother's awesomeness. Turning around, Izumi noticed Bakugo's frustrated expression. She asked him what was wrong, suggesting that he was still upset about not winning. Shota encouraged Bakugo to keep training and practicing. Bakugo, however, felt that despite his relentless training he couldn't surpass Izuku and questioned how he could become the greatest hero under such circumstances. Izuku then shared his perspective, explaining that the most powerful empires often fell victim to their own hubris, leading to their destruction by those they underestimated. He emphasized that power is ineffective if not wielded properly, regardless of its magnitude. Bakugo, feeling challenged, insisted that he had trained his power for a long time and questioned whether he had been doing it wrong. Izuku confirmed that Bakugo's approach was flawed, elaborating that many heroes and villains relied on sheer power, but that was not the only way to succeed. He explained that martial artists aim to end fights quickly and efficiently, using techniques that focus on timing and strategy rather than overwhelming force. He noted that Bakugo's straightforward charging style made him predictable, while martial artists would evade direct confrontation and strike decisively. Bakugo dismissed the idea, calling it cowardly, but Izuku countered that it was a clever tactic. He reminded Bakugo that humanity had thrived not just through might but through intellect. He acknowledged Bakugo's intelligence and the analogy he was trying to convey about humans and beasts. Izuku critiqued hero schools for prioritizing quirk control over teaching students about combat fundamentals. He argued that developing an effective fighting style required self-awareness, which many students lacked. Aizawa interjected, stating that true teaching involved guiding students to discover their own answers. Izuku countered that guidance was essential, and students should first learn the basics of fighting without quirks before integrating their quirk knowledge into their combat strategies. Aizawa pointed out that many students excelled, citing All Might as an example. Izuku acknowledged All Might's prowess but suggested that he could be even more effective if he employed tactics and skill alongside his strength. Aizawa's eyes widened in realization, and he smirked, instructing Izuku to include his insights in a report to Nizu. Izuku agreed and prepared to leave for his next class. Jiro expressed her amazement, and Denki affirmed that it was indeed like 4D chess. Momo interpreted Izuku's message as a call to normalize strategic thinking rather than viewing it as something extraordinary. Tenya concurred, while Mina admitted she would need further explanation. Bakugo then called out to Izuku, declaring that he would win the next time they fought. Izuku responded with encouragement, expressing his confidence in Bakugo's growth as he walked away, contemplating how Bakugo would channel his anger into becoming stronger. Good, his personality might be his greatest weakness, but at the same time, it is his greatest strength. Izuku wondered how things would develop from here. The rest of the day passed quickly for him, except for the afternoon class with 1B, which went much like his previous class with 1A. Izuku observed that it was indeed a problem that affected the entire school. Kendo called out to him, and he looked up to see her. She and most of the class bowed in respect, except for a few. Kendo thanked him, and Izuku responded with a bit of hesitation, placing his hand on her shoulder to encourage her to stand up straight. He reminded her that they were both students and had known each other for a while. Kendo smirked, teasing him about not liking to be called sensei. Izuku admitted it made him feel old, to which Kendo playfully insisted that was a good reason to call him that. She then lightly punched him on the shoulder, jokingly asking him not to blow her up. Izuku clarified that he wasn't like Hexcss, and Kendo asked him to thank her for the support device she had built for her. He agreed to do so and said he would see her at the representatives' meeting. As he turned to leave, Setsuna expressed surprise at how close Kendo had gotten to Izuku. Kendo remarked that he was surprisingly charming once you got to know him, despite his cold exterior. She mentioned that their initial interactions had been rough due to certain individuals, glancing at Tetsu and Monoma. However, after sitting next to each other in meetings, they had started talking and eventually became friends. Setsuna commented on Kendo's luck, to which Kendo replied that she appreciated Izuku for helping her with the representative's work. Setsuna teased her about the quality of their work, leading to a playful exchange. The next day at the USJ, Kirishima excitedly asked if Izuku would be kicking their butts again, prompting Tenya to remind him about his language. Izuku clarified that he wouldn't be doing that. Jiro inquired about their plans, and Izuku explained that a hero doesn't always fight. A true hero also rescues, focusing on both physical and mental well-being. He emphasized the importance of physical readiness, especially in dangerous situations, and asked for a volunteer. Izuku opened the door of his house, allowing Izumi and Shota to enter before closing it behind him. Shota expressed gratitude for being welcomed, and Izumi was glad that her father had allowed her to come, as he had previously forbidden it. Shota mentioned that her father had reacted strongly upon discovering that Izumi's father was All Might. Izumi asked if Shota's father knew about her dad's true form, to which Shota replied that he didn't, and they hadn't seen each other in over a decade. Izumi felt relieved that Shota was the only one outside their family who knew their secret. Shota recounted how her father had told her to stop associating with them, but she and Shoto had ignored him, considering it their first act of rebellion, though it had come with a heavy price. She rubbed her arm, revealing barely visible burn marks. Izumi expressed her sympathy, and Shota reassured her that Izumi had helped her a lot during those difficult times. Izumi lamented not being able to help Izuku in the same way. Shota admitted she should have helped him too but had been preoccupied with her own struggles. Izumi insisted they would never have abandoned her, acknowledging that they all made mistakes. She wished for a way to fix everything, stating she would give up her quirk if it meant saving Izuku. Shota affirmed her loyalty to her brother, saying she would do the same for him. Meanwhile, Izuku stood behind a wall, listening to their conversation. He walked into the living room and asked if they were ready. Both girls responded affirmatively, and Izuku took a seat at the table, ready to begin their study session. He asked what subjects they wanted to tackle first. They mentioned struggling with English, math, and history, and Izuku agreed to start with English. Izumi was curious if he spoke English, and Izuku revealed that he had taught himself a few years ago out of boredom. Shota was amazed to learn that he spoke several languages, including Korean, Chinese, Vietnamese, Spanish, French, German, Mongolian, and Russian, and he had plans to learn Arabic and Persian as well. Izuku decided they would dedicate an hour to each subject, starting with English. He encouraged Izumi to say a sentence in English, and she attempted to do so but struggled. Izuku, with a blank expression, noted that her attempt was quite poor, but he understood the general idea. He reassured her that they would start from the basics, ready to help them improve. Izumi and Shota confirmed their knowledge of the English alphabet. Izuku then began explaining the rules for properly structuring words and sentences. After an hour of instruction, Izumi expressed her growing understanding, while Shota noted that the lessons were much easier than when he had tried to understand present mic. Izuku suggested that they watch movies and series with English subtitles, as it would help them associate words more easily. He also recommended reading books in English, starting with those they had already read. Izuku reminded Izumi that Tashinori knew English and could assist her as well. With that, he shifted the focus to math, which elicited groans from both Izumi and Shota. Izuku encouraged them, explaining that understanding the formula was key, and with practice, they would remember it. He instructed them to take out their math books and work on exercises, offering help if they had questions. After another hour, both Izumi and Shota felt tired. Izuku reassured them that it was normal for their brains to feel overloaded and suggested a 15-minute break. As they took a moment to relax, Izumi remarked on how easy the lessons had been compared to their usual classes, while Shota expressed admiration for Izuku's teaching skills. Izumi encouraged Shota, reminding him that Izuku appreciated him and held him in high regard. Izuku returned from the kitchen with sandwiches and glasses of water, encouraging them to eat. Shota marveled at Izuku's abilities, prompting Izuku to remind him that everyone has their own strengths. He shared wisdom about flaws, explaining that they add beauty to the world and help people connect with one another. As they shifted topics, Izuku noted that history could be interesting depending on how it was taught. He began discussing the infamous villain All for One, explaining his powers and the impact he had on the world until his defeat by All Might. After another hour of study, Izuku announced they were done. He confirmed that the way they were taught made a significant difference. With one last lesson to go, he led them to the training center, where he instructed them to attack him without using their quirks. He emphasized the importance of strategy in battle and reminded them of the techniques he had taught them previously. After an intense hour of training, both Izumi and Shota collapsed, panting heavily. Izuku praised their efforts, noting they had performed better than he expected. He explained that his experience gave him an advantage but encouraged them to stand up for the next phase of their training. Izuku outlined their individual focuses. Shota would work on controlling his fire as he did with his ice, and Izumi would learn to harness her ability to fly by manipulating electromagnetic fields. He assured them that this was just the beginning of their training journey. "We will continue tomorrow." Izumi and Shota agreed enthusiastically. For the next 3 weeks leading up to the exams, the two girls dedicated themselves to private training and study sessions with Izuku. They worked hard to absorb the lessons he provided, and Izuku put forth his best efforts to teach them. Ultimately, their progress was evident. On the final day of their training, the three of them collapsed on the training ground, panting heavily. Izuku acknowledged their hard work, expressing that they had exceeded his expectations and that he might soon become obsolete. Shota was taken aback, while Izumi urged him not to say such things. Izuku explained that a teacher's goal is for their students to surpass them, and he felt limited by his own lack of a quirk. He believed that he would need gadgets to match their potential. Shota suggested that Izuku should use those gadgets to become a hero, as he wanted to help those without quirks. He could set an example and become a symbol for them. Izuku replied that there are many ways to be a hero and that someone needed to stay behind to create the gadgets that would help others. With the exams approaching, Izuku expressed his confidence in their abilities, expecting them to perform well. Both Izumi and Shota promised to do their best. The next day, Izumi approached Shota, who was waiting for her in the hallway, with Izuku walking behind her. He waved a greeting to Shota, who returned the gesture. As they prepared to head to their classroom, Izuku wished them good luck, and they smiled in response before parting ways, ready for the exams. In the classroom, Izumi and Shota took their seats and began chatting as more students arrived. When the bell rang, everyone settled down. Aizawa entered, making his way to the front, and announced that this would be their greatest trial yet, urging them to be ready for the exams. The written portion of the exams lasted all day until lunchtime. The subjects were standard high school topics, culminating in written theories on heroics and a morality test. Finally, the exams concluded, and they could prepare for the practical portion. At the cafeteria, Izumi noted the cheerful atmosphere, while Shota speculated that everyone was excited for the practical exams. Momo asked how they felt about the written exams, and both girls found them surprisingly easy. Shoto felt reassured by their confidence, while Bakugo echoed their sentiments. Kirishima remarked that he had expected Midoriya's tests to be more challenging, and Uraraka admitted to having worried about failing. Denki agreed that the exams had been easier than anticipated. Tenya wondered if their understanding stemmed from how Izuku had taught them. Bakugo, in his typical manner, commented on Denki's performance, leading to a light-hearted exchange among their group. Bakugo's mind wandered back to a moment during the sports festival when Izuku had bested him in battle, reminding him of his own insecurities. He quickly returned to the present, where Mina expressed curiosity about the practical exams. Jiro hoped they would be as manageable as the written tests, while Shota inquired if anyone had more information. Izumi was about to continue eating when Monoma unexpectedly bumped into her, making a comment about her head. Shota warned Monoma to leave them alone, but Monoma continued, mentioning their encounter with the hero killer and implying that they attracted trouble. The tension at the table rose as everyone glared at him. Kendo intervened, grabbing Monoma by the collar and reprimanding him for his insensitivity regarding Ida's brother. Izumi and Shota supported Kendo's stance. Kendo then shared that she had heard from an upperclassman that they would be fighting robots in the practical exams, similar to those from the entrance exams. This news eased some of the tension. Monoma, realizing he had revealed their strategy, became frustrated. Just then, Kendo lost her grip on him, and he found himself on the ground, with Midoriya's foot resting on his head. Izuku remarked that he hadn't noticed Monoma, but his large head made it hard to miss. Izumi looked on, and Izuku clarified that his actions were not for her sake but due to his annoyance with Monoma's personality. Izuku felt a pang of regret as he looked at Kendo. Kendo reassured him, acknowledging that the situation had been deserved. They shifted the conversation to the upcoming final exams, with Kendo sharing what an upperclassman had told him about fighting robots. Izuku dismissed it as a rumor, prompting Shota to inquire about the exam details, reminding them that he was technically faculty. Izuku hesitated but eventually revealed that they would be facing the teachers. Kendo was taken aback by the news, and Mina's hopes were dashed. Tenya encouraged Mina, reminding her of their training, while Izumi supported her as well. Shota wondered how the pairings would be determined, and Izuku mentioned that there was a list but couldn't divulge more. Bakugo then asked if Izuku would be among the teachers, to which Izuku replied that he had his own exams to focus on. Siro expressed relief, and Izuku declared his expectation of total victory, warning that any failures would lead to consequences. As the exam commenced, the students stood before their teachers. Aizawa began announcing the pairings, which included Yaoyorozu and Siro against Midnight, Koda and Jiro against Present Mike, and others, culminating in Izumi facing All Might. Izumi felt a mix of dread and determination at the thought of battling her father. The exam kicked off, and Kirishima and Sato charged at Cementos. Cementos unleashed a barrage of cement walls, but the duo fought through, eventually pretending to tire before surprising Cementos with a sudden attack. Kirishima launched himself, breaking through the weakened walls and striking Cementos, who fell to the ground. Kirishima quickly secured him with HNDCFFS, and Sato praised the effectiveness of their strategy. Meanwhile, Todoroki and Bakugo faced Aizawa. They exchanged glances and nodded before Todoroki made the first move. He used his flames to gauge Aizawa's quirk, but when the flames extinguished, he dodged Aizawa's scarf and moved strategically. Aizawa questioned Todoroki about Bakugo's whereabouts, and Todoroki countered that Aizawa would ultimately fail if he let Bakugo escape. This moment of hesitation allowed Todoroki to use his ice to distract Aizawa, leading to Bakugo's explosive attack. Together, they managed to corner Aizawa, leaving him with no options. Tenya and Ojiro strategized against Power Loader, understanding his quirk's advantages. They decided to surprise him instead of running away. As the exam began, Tenya prepared himself for Power Loader's approach. When Power Loader grabbed his leg, Tenya unleashed a powerful kick, sending him flying and allowing them to navigate the test area successfully. Izumi faced All Might in the final pairing. She charged through the fake city, anticipating an attack. All Might's powerful strike sent her crashing into a building, and as he rushed to her side, he was filled with concern. Izumi, despite the pain, called out to him, revealing her vulnerability. All Might knelt beside her, worried about the impact of his actions. "What can I do?" Izumi slowly raised her hand, opening her eyes just enough to look at her father. Her hand gently touched his face. Izumi smirked and playfully declared that she had him. All Might, surprised, reacted as a sudden surge of energy coursed through him, causing him to stumble back. Izumi called out to Shota, who quickly appeared and handcuffed All Might. They exchanged a triumphant high five. All Might, still bewildered, asked what had just happened. Izumi proudly inquired about his thoughts on her acting skills. All Might was taken aback, realizing she had been acting all along. Izumi reminded him that he had trained her whole life, so he should have known that the punch wouldn't knock her out, even though it had hurt. Shota chimed in, explaining that fighting is all about deception. Izumi added that victory comes to those who know when to fight and when to hold back, a lesson they had learned through experience. They understood that they couldn't confront him directly and expect to win. All Might acknowledged her growth but warned that he wouldn't fall for the same trick twice. Shota elaborated that after a victory, one should adapt and respond to new circumstances rather than repeat the same tactics. They both credited Izuku for teaching them so much. Izumi then mentioned that it was her turn to cook and that she would prepare katsudon for Izuku. It wasn't much, but she wanted to contribute in some way. Shota offered to help her with the cooking. All Might reflected on their growth, expressing his pride in them even if they didn't believe it. He acknowledged that he had also grown and felt a deep sense of pride for his children. Izumi and Shota exited their classroom after bidding farewell to their classmates and made their way down the hall, engaging in light conversation as they headed to the support course. Upon reaching the door of Izuku's class, they were taken aback by what awaited them. Suddenly, the classroom doors burst open with a loud explosion, filling the hallway with a thick cloud of smoke. The girls quickly covered their mouths and noses to avoid inhaling it. Shouts of surprise and frustration echoed from inside the classroom as students emerged, coughing and waving their hands to clear the air. Even the teacher stumbled out, trying to disperse the smoke. The teacher announced that class was dismissed and instructed Midoriya to assist Hexcss in cleaning up the mess. Izuku acknowledged the request with a resigned tone. Inside the classroom, Izuku retrieved a small fan and switched it on, attempting to clear the smoke. After finding a corner to sit in, he perched himself on a desk. He wondered why he always found himself in these situations. Hexcss, unapologetic, claimed that at least she had someone to keep her company while cleaning up. Izuku tossed the fan to her and pointed out the mop on the other side of the room, insisting she handle the cleanup herself. Hexcss protested, reminding him that the teacher had said he would help. Izuku emphasized the importance of facing the consequences of one's actions, especially when they led to such a significant mess. Hexcss retorted playfully, calling him Mr. Mature. Shota then cautiously asked if it was safe to enter, to which Izuku confirmed, advising him not to breathe too deeply. Shota and Izumi stepped into the classroom, both shocked by the chaos. They questioned whether a bomb had gone off, and Izuku directed them to Hexcss for answers. Hexcss defended her actions, stating she was merely testing a new invention, insisting that failures were part of the process. Izuku pointed out that she seemed to fail often, prompting Hexcss to challenge him, vowing to catch up one day. Shota inquired if such incidents were common in the support course, and Izuku explained that their class was located in the most isolated part of the school for a reason. Izumi remarked that everything made sense now. Shota then expressed their desire to train, despite the exams being over. Izumi reminded Izuku of his belief that practice makes perfect, and they requested his help to continue improving. Izuku, feeling a sense of responsibility, agreed to assist them. A small smile appeared on his face, barely noticeable, but it signified a shift in his perspective. He felt a renewed sense of purpose, believing he could make a difference in the world. He reflected on his feelings toward Izumi, recognizing that his anger was directed more at the societal values that influenced her actions rather than at her personally. He understood that holding on to resentment wouldn't lead to progress. He needed to address the root of the problem to prevent others from suffering similar fates. Together, Izumi, Shota, and Izuku walked to the Yagi household, following their usual routine but with a more relaxed approach as Izuku insisted they needed rest, while the girls were eager to train. After their activities, they took a bath, and Izumi and Shota headed to the kitchen to surprise Izuku with a katsudon. All Might and Inko arrived home, surprised to find the girls preparing dinner but offered no objections. Once the meal was ready, Izumi and Shota managed to coax Izuku out of his room and to the dining table, where All Might and Inko were already seated. Izuku took a seat next to Shota, with Izumi across from them, and the girls presented him with a generous bowl of katsudon. Shota expressed hope that he would enjoy it, while Izumi apologized for the time it took to prepare, explaining it was their way of showing gratitude. Izuku, feeling a mix of emotions, acknowledged their efforts, albeit reluctantly. The dinner proceeded with light chatter, though Izuku remained mostly reserved, speaking primarily with Shota. This gathering marked the first time in a long while that they had all sat together at the table. As he looked at his family, a wave of sorrow washed over him. He longed for the days when they would share laughter and warmth as a family. Yet he felt conflicted, fearing that if he forgave them, they might betray his trust again, causing him to endure the pain of loss once more. His internal struggle left him uncertain about how to respond to their attempts to connect. The void left by their absence was something he never wanted to experience again, yet the warmth of a caring family was a feeling he desperately wished to reclaim. He knew that if given the chance, he would learn to share that warmth with others. The next day in Class 1A, Aizawa announced that none of the students had failed. Most of the class cheered as none of them had failed the exams, and some even cried tears of joy. Aizawa announced that as a reward, the school had organized a training camp in the woods during their vacation, scheduled for 2 weeks later, urging everyone to prepare. With that, he dismissed the homeroom. Mina suggested they go to the mall to buy anything they needed, and the class excitedly agreed to the idea of hanging out together. Izumi asked Shoto if he was planning to join them, but he declined, stating he couldn't go. Izumi playfully complained that he owed her a hangout, to which Shoto reluctantly agreed. She then turned to Shota, who was eager to join. Uraraka approached Bakugo, asking if he would go to the mall. He dismissed the idea, but when she playfully used her quirk to make him levitate, he reluctantly agreed to go if she set him down. After she complied, Mina waved goodbye, and the class cheered in excitement for their outing the next day. The following day, Izumi was about to leave home when she spotted Izuku approaching. He mentioned he would also be going to the mall, needing to buy some supplies. Izumi was surprised but accepted his company as they walked to the mall, where they soon separated. Izuku wandered through the shops, searching for new notepads and sketchpads for his drawings. An idea struck him about a holographic sketchpad, which he decided to submit to Mr. Cater. As he made his way out of the mall to wait for Izumi, he noticed her sitting with a hooded figure. Shota stood in front of them, and Izuku felt compelled to hide and observe. The hooded figure stood up and walked away, prompting Izumi to stand and shout something after them. Intrigued, Izuku decided to follow the figure outside into an alley, where he took out his taser gun and pointed it at them. The figure turned around, revealing themselves as the leader of the League of Villains, which startled Izuku. The figure, Nana, recognized Izuku and questioned his intentions. She explained that her boss wanted to speak with him and assured him it wasn't a trap. A portal of purple mist suddenly appeared, and Nana beckoned him to follow her through it. Upon crossing the portal, Izuku found himself in a bar where a man made of purple mist stood behind the counter. Nana instructed Kurogiri to inform her boss of Izuku's arrival. Kurogiri disappeared and soon returned, opening another portal for Izuku to enter. Inside the dark room, a voice welcomed him, and Izuku turned to see a man who introduced himself as All for One. He expressed a desire to talk with Izuku, claiming a familial connection. Izuku was taken aback, struggling to comprehend the implications of the villain's words. All for One revealed that he was Izuku's father, a revelation that left Izuku in disbelief. He questioned how this could be true, given his mother's status as a pro-hero. All for One explained that she had never known of his identity, and as they continued their conversation, he provided evidence of their connection. Izuku sat in shock as All for One recounted their past, detailing how he had fallen in love with Izuku's mother while posing as a businessman. He spoke of his desire to leave his villainous identity behind to be with her, but circumstances had forced him to remain in the shadows. He expressed his pain at not being able to be part of Izuku's life. When Izuku inquired about the sludge incident, All for One admitted he had intended to intervene but was thwarted by All Might. As the conversation progressed, All for One revealed his desire for Izuku to join him in changing the world, offering his guidance and support. "Let me give you a hand this time." Izuku pondered the offer presented to him. All for One expressed that he wanted what was best for Izuku, emphasizing the importance of happiness and personal choice. He assured Izuku that he would not be forced to join him, encouraging him to follow his own desires. Izuku found the proposition tempting but felt conflicted. He had invested so much effort into his current path and worried about the limitations that might come with aligning himself with All for One. All for One acknowledged Izuku's achievements and expressed pride in his progress. After a moment of reflection, Izuku decided it was time to leave. All for One inquired if Izuku planned to oppose him, to which Izuku replied that the law required him to say yes, though he admitted he did not have a fondness for it. All for one wished him luck, referring to him as his son, as a purple portal opened and Izuku stepped through. Upon emerging from the portal, Izuku found himself back in the alley, leaning against a wall and sighing, realizing that things had just become more complicated. His phone vibrated and he checked it, noting that Mr. Cater wanted to see him. At Cater Industries, Izuku entered Zabier's office, where he was greeted with urgency. Zabier apologized for the sudden contact but explained that he had good news. Izuku's assistant had completed his training. The doors opened to reveal Jitsuna, who excitedly acknowledged his new role and expressed gratitude for the change in his life. Zabier explained that Jitsuna would assist with paperwork and serve as Izuku's bodyguard. He then mentioned an upcoming event at Island, a major center for scientific research, and proposed sending Izuku as his representative since he was unable to attend due to corporate commitments. Jitsuna congratulated Izuku, who was taken aback and expressed his gratitude. Zabier reassured Izuku that this experience would be valuable and informed him that he would not be going alone. Another member of their team would accompany him. Just then, Vlad appeared, playfully wrapping an arm around Izuku's neck and expressing excitement about the trip. Zabier confirmed Vlad's experience with Island events, assuring Izuku that he would guide him. Izuku returned home after receiving the news, only to be stopped by All Might, who requested a moment of his time. After some hesitation, Izuku agreed to listen. All Might revealed that they wanted to invite him to join them on their trip to Island, recognizing his passion for creation. Izumi, present at the table, reassured Izuku that he was not obligated to join them. Izuku explained that Mr. Cater had already arranged for him to go as part of a business trip. All Might and Izumi exchanged glances, realizing they should have anticipated this. All Might then suggested that it should not be an issue for Izuku to travel with them on the same flight. Izuku contemplated the idea, considering the differences between traveling with All Might and Izumi versus Vlad. Ultimately, he decided to consult Mr. Cater since it was a formal business trip. The next day at the airport, Izuku, Izumi, and a deflated All Might made their way to their plane, guided by a worker to the private section of the airport. After a wait, they boarded a private jet bound for Island. As they settled in, Izuku took out his sketchbook to continue developing his plans. All Might inquired about Izuku's project, to which Izuku explained he was working on a holographic sketchpad. Surprised by the response, All Might remarked on its complexity. Izumi asked if Izuku had any other projects, prompting a moment of silence as he retrieved a notebook. Izuku shared his experiments with machines that counter gravity to create a levitation effect, similar to what Izumi achieved with her quirk. He also mentioned his investigations into matter compression and his attempts to create a larger zero-point reactor, though those efforts had mostly ended in failure. Izumi offered to help with her quirk, which Izuku acknowledged could be beneficial. He then expressed curiosity about the nature of One for All, wondering where it stockpiled energy and how its potential could revolutionize energy usage. All Might, taken aback, admitted he had never considered that perspective. Izuku reflected on the concept of destiny, leaving All Might to ponder the future that awaited them all. Destiny does not exist. Izumi asked why he thought that way. Izuku explained that the idea of destiny was merely a concept created by people seeking validation, a way to feel special and assure themselves that their existence had meaning. He found it foolish. All Might interjected, questioning whether it was wrong for people to seek meaning in their lives. Izuku clarified that he wasn't against the search for meaning. Rather, he believed it was misguided to think that one's worth was predetermined by circumstances of birth. He argued that everyone is inherently equal, and the concept of destiny undermines personal growth and change. Izumi expressed concern over his assertion that humans had no worth. Izuku affirmed that existence lacked inherent value, and it was up to individuals to create meaning through their choices. He criticized the notion of destiny for suggesting that people are bound to a predetermined path, which stifles their potential for growth. He recalled All Might's words about being who one wants to be, emphasizing that many villains did not choose their paths. All Might sought clarification, prompting Izuku to explain how society often judged individuals based on their quirks, leading to rejection and limiting their dreams. Those labeled as potential villains were pushed into roles they never desired, and society would later claim it was destiny that shaped them. Izuku found it ironic that the same society that condemned villains was responsible for their creation, neglecting to rectify its mistakes. All Might questioned whether villains could change. Izuku believed that anyone could change if they truly wanted to and were willing to undergo the process. All Might pondered how one could change a heart filled with hatred, to which Izuku responded that true heroes not only save lives but also heal hearts. All Might was taken aback by Izuku's insight, realizing he had overlooked a vital lesson from his master. He reflected on how he had failed Izuku, acknowledging the destruction of their bond and his trust. He vowed to save Izuku but understood that he first needed to comprehend Izuku's feelings, admitting he had prioritized his own grief over Izuku's. Izumi excused herself to the restroom, leaving All Might and Izuku in an uncomfortable silence. All Might then asked Izuku how he felt about him. Izuku was taken aback, questioning whether his actions hadn't already made his feelings clear. All Might insisted he needed to hear it directly. Izuku expressed his frustration, revealing the pain of feeling abandoned by his family and the betrayal he felt from All Might, the person he had once looked up to as a father. He lamented the loneliness and grief that accompanied the realization that their relationship had changed irrevocably. Lowering his head, Izuku questioned whether there were even enough words to convey the depth of his feelings. All Might, moved by Izuku's anguish, acknowledged that there were no words to justify his actions or express his sorrow. He recognized that nothing could alter the past, but he could influence the future. Izuku lifted his head slightly as All Might declared his intention to change. He resolved to be a better father, willing to undertake the necessary steps, no matter how long it took. Izuku reminded him that words alone were insufficient, to which All Might replied that he would give those words meaning through his actions, proving their value over time. There were things Izuku felt he could only express in this way. He had never said it before, but he felt a swell of pride for what the other had achieved. He knew that if this path continued, the other would become something greater than himself, though perhaps that had already happened. Most importantly, there was love and unwavering commitment to never leave the other's side again. Izuku glanced to the side, absorbing the weight of those words. All Might urged him to remember this promise before standing up and returning to his seat. Izuku clenched his fists, rising from his own seat and heading toward the restrooms at the other end of the plane. Meanwhile, Izumi leaned against the wall in her restroom, having overheard the conversation. Once inside the restroom, Izuku quickly closed the door behind him. He stared at his reflection in the mirror, noticing the remnants of tears on his face. Frustration bubbled within him as he thought about the situation, feeling a mix of emotions toward the mentor he admired. Izuku returned from the restroom and settled back into his seat. Izumi was back, and All Might was gazing out the window. As Izuku continued to work on his notes, an awkward silence filled the air. Izumi attempted to break the silence by asking Izuku if he thought it was possible for humans to travel to space in the future. After a moment of contemplation, Izuku raised his head from his notebook and confidently stated that it was indeed possible. This piqued All Might's interest, and he began to listen to their conversation. Izuku explained that estimates suggested it would take around $60 billion to establish a base on the moon. Izumi was taken aback, questioning if that was a significant amount. Izuku reassured her that it was equivalent to Germany's budget surplus, making it less daunting in the grand scheme of things. He speculated that it would take about a decade to set up a moon base. Izumi wondered why such a project wasn't already underway, to which Izuku replied that convincing politicians to invest in long-term projects was challenging, as they often focused on short-term gains. Izumi sighed, feeling the distance between their dreams and reality. Curious, Izumi asked if Izuku believed there were aliens on other planets. He affirmed that it was perfectly possible and speculated about the potential consequences of discovering extraterrestrial life, suggesting it could lead to catastrophic outcomes due to the concept of the Great Filter. Intrigued, Izumi encouraged Izuku to explain further. As their conversation continued, they engaged in various topics throughout the flight, with Izumi frequently bringing up subjects that she knew would interest Izuku, making him more open to talking. All Might occasionally joined in as well. After several hours of flying, they were nearing their destination. All Might spotted Island from the window and announced their arrival. Izuku and Izumi gazed out at the artificial island in awe. Izumi marveled at the fact that it was all created by humans, while Izuku noted that Island was quite different from Japan. Here, quirks could be used freely, and the residents were either VIPs or the families of scientists. Izuku questioned whether the families were forced to live there, and All Might explained it was to prevent leaks and allow scientists to focus on their work. Izuku remarked that it sounded a bit like slavery, but accepted the explanation. Suddenly, a man shouted that All Might was there, and a crowd quickly formed around him, seeking autographs. Recognizing Izumi as the UA tournament winner and Izuku as the host of Cater Expo, they too were surrounded by eager fans. While Izuku and All Might maintained their composure, Izumi felt overwhelmed by the attention. As All Might signed autographs, several fans attempted to get closer, but he skillfully maneuvered through the crowd. He scooped up Izuku and Izumi under his arms, much to their surprise. Izumi protested, insisting she wasn't luggage, while Izuku pointed out he could walk on his own. All Might dismissed their concerns, stating there was no time to argue. He squatted down and leaped high into the air, landing outside the throng of people before sprinting away, apologizing to the fans as he did so. Once they reached a quieter area, All Might set them down. Izuku remarked that the experience had been fun. All Might apologized for the chaos, explaining it was the quickest way to escape the crowd. Izumi wondered how they remained unfazed by so many people, to which All Might laughed, sharing that years of being surrounded by paparazzi had made him accustomed to it. He noted that Izuku had also been on camera multiple times, having hosted Cater Expo, and that learning to handle such situations was essential for aspiring heroes. He then mentioned they needed to meet an old friend. Curious, Izuku asked who this friend was, but All Might wanted to keep it a surprise. Just then, a blonde girl with blue eyes approached them, calling out to All Might. She seemed slightly older than Izuku and Izumi. Izumi thought the girl looked familiar, and Izuku agreed, feeling they had met someone who resembled her before. All Might welcomed the girl, who jumped and hugged him, calling him Uncle Might. Izuku and Izumi stood in shock, processing the revelation that they had a cousin. All Might introduced Melissa as the daughter of an old friend, explaining that they had all met when they were younger. Melissa greeted them warmly and complimented their performance during the sports festival, expressing admiration for Izumi's hero costume. Izumi happily confirmed it was her costume, and Melissa asked if she could touch it. Izumi agreed, extending her arm as Melissa marveled at the fabric, noting its comfort and resilience. It was extremely light and comfortable, yet it still provided protection from minor attacks and was difficult to tear. Melissa marveled at the costume, exclaiming that it was almost the perfect outfit for any hero. Izumi agreed, noting that it was to be expected since Izuku had made it. Melissa was surprised to learn that Izuku had created it to ensure it wouldn't be easily destroyed, allowing her to focus on her battles without worry. Melissa asked if it had been difficult to make, to which Izuku replied that it wasn't really, as he had made others like it. Izumi chimed in, mentioning that he had crafted one for a friend, and after she told her classmates, they all approached him in the support course to have their old costumes remade with the new fabric. Melissa was impressed and asked if there was anything Izuku couldn't do. He was taken aback by the compliment, but she continued to praise his achievements, from his performance at the sports festival to becoming the youngest host in Cater Expo history, and the remarkable inventions he had presented, including the zero-point reactor. Izuku humbly insisted that he had simply worked hard and believed anyone could achieve similar success. All Might then interrupted, suggesting it was time to go. Melissa quickly agreed, eager to surprise her father, and led the way. Meanwhile, on the island, Wolfram was on a call, assuring the person on the other end that no one suspected anything and that he would deliver as promised. In David Shield's lab, David was looking at a photo of All Might in his prime when Sam informed him that he had finished cleaning the place. David thanked him, and they walked to his office. Sam encouraged David to have lunch with his daughter, but David mentioned that she was currently at the academy working on an independent investigation. Melissa, having overheard, proudly stated that it was only natural for her to follow in her father's footsteps. David was surprised to see her and was touched by her thoughtfulness in wanting to give him a surprise. Just then, the door swung open, revealing All Might, who entered with enthusiasm, expressing his excitement at their reunion. Izumi and Izuku stood behind All Might, feeling a bit embarrassed by his exuberance. David was astonished to see All Might and they shared a laugh, reminiscing about the years that had passed since they last met. All Might expressed his joy at seeing David again and asked if he remembered his children. David chuckled, recalling how much smaller they had been the last time they met. Izuku, eager to impress, interjected with a summary of David's impressive accomplishments, noting that he was one of the greatest scientists and had been All Might's companion during his time in America. David acknowledged Izuku's knowledge and praised both him and Izumi for their performances on television. All Might mentioned that Izuku was currently on a business trip representing Cater Industries, which intrigued David. They discussed Vlad, who usually represented Cater, and David sent his regards, reminding Izuku to tell Cater that he still owed him a drink. As All Might began to cough, David noticed and suggested that Melissa take Izuku and Izumi around the Expo. Melissa eagerly accepted the opportunity, and the two followed her as Sam left the room. Once alone, All Might expressed his gratitude to David for his understanding of his condition. At the Expo, Melissa, Izuku, and Izumi marveled at the bustling atmosphere filled with people and heroes. Izumi was particularly excited, noting that there would be a party that night with many VIPs, and she confirmed that Izuku would be there as a representative of Cater. As Izumi received a message on her phone, she excused herself to attend to something, leaving Melissa and Izuku to explore the hall showcasing the latest hero equipment. Melissa pointed out a multipurpose beagle that could fly and function as a submarine, and Izuku was impressed. She continued to showcase various suits, including one that allowed a hero to dive to depths of 7,000 meters. Melissa then placed a helmet on Izuku's head, boasting about its 36 different screens. Izuku was curious about the necessity of so many screens, and Melissa explained that most of the technology was based on patents held by her father. Izuku, however, seemed lost in thought and expressed a concern about the exclusivity of the hero equipment. He questioned why the government invested so much in projects to aid heroes but did not also focus on preventing individuals from becoming villains in the first place, suggesting that better schools and more accessible resources could help change perceptions about those with quirks deemed villain-like or those who were quirkless. Why not invest in technologies to clean the oceans and space debris in orbit, or technologies to help decontaminate the soil and promote faster growth of plants and trees? Quirks are often viewed merely as weapons, which they can be, but that only scratches the surface of their true potential. Melissa expressed her curiosity about Izuku's feelings towards heroes. Izuku shared his concerns about the significant investments made in them, noting that large sums of money often attract individuals who may not truly embody the spirit of heroism. He felt that, at this point, they were funding celebrities rather than genuine heroes. This was why he admired Cater. Their technologies were accessible to the public and benefited the common people, not just a select few. Izuku worked at Cater to create technologies that would assist those with the heart and will of heroes but who lacked the means to realize their dreams. Melissa acknowledged his perspective and wished him luck. Just then, Shota appeared, commenting on how much fun Izuku seemed to be having. Izuku was surprised to see Shota and noticed that Izumi, Uraraka, Momo, Jiro, Ida, Shoto, Bakugo, and Kirishima were all present in their hero costumes. He inquired about their presence, and Melissa asked if they were his classmates. Izuku confirmed that while Izumi was his sister, he was familiar with the others. Bakugo challenged Izuku, questioning if he had a problem with them, but Izuku reassured him that he did not. Shoto explained that he and Izumi were there as representatives of their father, while Ida stated he was representing his family. Momo added that she had invited Jiro and Uraraka since she had extra tickets from the UA tournament. Izumi then revealed that she had invited Bakugo and Kirishima, having given her extra tickets to them. Shota had intended to surprise Izuku, and when asked what they were doing, Izuku mentioned that Melissa was giving him a tour of the Expo. Melissa introduced herself and offered to show the group around, which they eagerly accepted. After an hour of exploring, They grew tired and settled at a local restaurant. The girls sat at one table while the boys occupied another. Kirishima expressed his hunger, prompting Bakugo to tell him to stop whining. Shoto intervened, reminding Bakugo to tone it down for the sake of the children nearby. Ida admonished Bakugo for his language, and Izuku offered to order food for everyone, noting that he could cover the cost. Despite some hesitation from his friends about him spending his money, Izuku insisted it was not a problem, as he had more than he needed and didn't spend much. Eventually, they agreed to let him pay. As they waited for their food, Kaminari and Shiro unexpectedly arrived, prompting Izuku to acknowledge them. They explained they were there for a job opportunity at the expo. The boys were curious about Melissa, and Tenya reminded them to respect Izuku, who was technically their teacher. The girls then announced they were heading to another attraction, leaving the boys to sigh and request their food be wrapped up for later. A time skip brought them to a competition where Kirishima showcased his skills, impressing the crowd and earning a high score. The girls cheered for him, and Izuku, Shoto, and Tenya stood by, proud of their friend. Bakugo followed, using his explosions to clear obstacles and claiming the top spot in record time. Melissa marveled at the talents of the UA students, affirming that they were destined to become future heroes. Shoto then took his turn, freezing the area and setting a new record. Bakugo, feeling competitive, vowed to go again, while Kirishima and Ida discussed their own participation. Izuku decided to step back from the competition, prompting Bakugo to challenge his courage, reminding him that as a teacher, he should set an example. Melissa was impressed to learn about Izuku's role as a teacher. With a renewed sense of determination, Izuku began to walk away, pulling out his phone. He then made his way to the participants' area, still focused on his phone. The presenter announced a new participant and signaled the start of the event. Izuku extended his arm with his phone and pressed a button, causing all the robots to self-destruct in an instant. The presenter was taken aback, questioning if that was allowed. Izuku calmly replied that the goal was to destroy the robots, and the method was not specified. The presenter hesitated but ultimately declared Izuku the new winner. Meanwhile, the UA students and Melissa were left speechless, with Bakugo's jaw nearly dropping to the floor. Izuku returned to them, and they all maintained their astonished expressions. He suggested they close their mouths to avoid attracting mosquitoes. Bakugo accused him of cheating, to which Izuku responded that technically, he hadn't. Jiro pointed out that he had merely pressed a button, while Uraraka admired Midoriya's ingenuity. Melissa asked how he accomplished it, and Izuku explained that he recognized the Cater technology used for security on the island. He had the codes to bypass the system and ordered the robots to self-destruct, emphasizing that winning didn't always require fighting. Shota acknowledged Izuku's exceptional skills. Suddenly, Vlad and Jitsuna approached, prompting Izuku to ask if they would report him. Vlad laughed, claiming he often did the same. Jitsuna explained their late arrival due to a minor plane incident caused by Vlad, who had nearly caused a crash that required an emergency landing in the Philippines. Izuku found it amusing and suggested he would join them next time, but he declined, claiming he would ruin the fun. He introduced Jitsuna as his assistant and bodyguard, while Vlad jokingly offered to explode something. Izuku advised everyone to ignore Vlad, who was known for his antics. Bakugo questioned the need for a bodyguard, given Izuku's strength, to which Jitsuna humorously agreed. Izuku explained that Jitsuna acted as a mini-boss for anyone who wanted to challenge him. Jitsuna laughed, and Izuku introduced his classmates from UA, including Melissa, the daughter of David Shield. Vlad recognized Izumi as Izuku's sister, and Izuku playfully rejected the comparison. He inquired about any protocols from the board, but Vlad informed him that they would only need to follow the party guidelines. They agreed to meet at the party, and Vlad decided to borrow Jitsuna for some paperwork. As Vlad dragged Jitsuna away, Izuku watched with a bemused expression while Melissa chuckled softly. She remarked on how interesting Izuku's life seemed, to which he modestly agreed. Meanwhile, on another part of Island, Wolfram received a concerning call about All Might's presence and assured the caller that they would handle the situation. At Dave's lab, he examined All Might's condition, alarmed by the rapid decline in his power. All Might acknowledged that his long career as a hero was taking its toll. Dave expressed his concern for the future of peace in Japan, emphasizing All Might's crucial role in maintaining low crime rates. All Might reassured him that there were other capable heroes, but he remained determined to be the symbol of peace, believing that hope still existed through the next generation. At a restaurant, Kaminari and Shiro marveled at the crowd gathered for the pre-opening. They were soon joined by their classmates, including Melissa and Izuku. Ida praised their hard work and presented them with invitations to the reception party, which Melissa had reserved for them. Excited, they celebrated their efforts paying off. Ida reminded everyone of the importance of maintaining UA's reputation at the party, stressing the need to arrive early and dressed impeccably. As the class began to disperse, Izumi and Izuku were the last to leave when Melissa called out to Izuku, asking him to join her for a moment. There is still one place Izuku wanted to show Melissa. Izumi decided to go ahead and change, while Izuku and Melissa walked away together. At the Institute of Island, Izuku admired the surroundings and expressed his appreciation. Melissa asked if he liked it, to which he confirmed. She explained that graduates from the institute either stayed on the island or went abroad, typically to Cater or Say, which was known for its weapon industry. Melissa shared her surprise at seeing Izuku as the host of the Cater Expo, especially since he was younger than her. Learning that he was Uncle Might's son made her excited to meet him. Izuku was curious about her admiration. Melissa revealed that she looked up to him because he was quirkless, just like her. She recounted how people had told her she wouldn't achieve anything without a quirk, but she pursued her dream of becoming a scientist like her father despite the discouragement. Watching Izuku perform at the sports festival and then at the expo inspired her to keep going, and she felt grateful for that. Izuku encouraged Melissa, telling her she had a lot of potential and should not let anyone tell her otherwise. He believed she would make her father proud. Melissa was taken aback by his words and felt emotional, quickly wiping away tears and smiling at him. She thanked him, saying his compliment meant a lot coming from someone she admired. Izuku humbly downplayed his achievements, insisting he was just an ordinary person. He encouraged her not to give up and to try her best. Melissa wondered how she would know if she could succeed, and Izuku reminded her that she wouldn't know unless she tried. As they prepared to part ways, Izuku mentioned that she should visit a Cater office after graduation, hinting that there might be an opportunity for her there. Melissa's eyes widened with excitement, and she laughed, promising to take his advice. Time passed, and most of Class 1A had already arrived at the party, dressed formally. When Izumi entered, Shiro and Kaminari were amazed by her appearance, while Shoto was left speechless. Izuku apologized for being late, and the girls admired him as well, commenting on the good looks that seemed to run in the family. Melissa soon arrived, and they began to chat. Izuku approached Shota, who was standing a bit to the side. He complimented her on her appearance, and she shyly returned the compliment. Izuku noticed she seemed nervous, and she admitted it had been a long time since she attended a party, as her father rarely took her along. Izuku reassured her that there was no need to worry. Shota confided that she couldn't dance, feeling embarrassed about it. Izuku, sharing her concern, suggested they learn together at the party. Shota's eyes lit up, and she agreed, sealing their promise with a pinky swear. Just then, Vlad interrupted them, reminding Izuku of their responsibilities. Izuku sighed, realizing he had forgotten about their obligations. Vlad urged them to follow protocol, and Izuku turned back to Shota, saying he would see her later. She nodded, still feeling a bit flustered. As they walked to the elevator, Izuku asked Vlad when he had become so strict about following protocol. Vlad jokingly replied it had only been a few minutes, while Jitsuna apologized for not being able to stop him. Izuku reassured them that there was nothing romantic between him and Shota, to which Vlad teased him. In the lobby, Uraraka wondered when they would be able to start the party, while Ida insisted they wait for Kirishima and Bakugo. Jiro suggested leaving without them, but Ida firmly disagreed. Izumi suggested they wait a little longer. 30 minutes later, the party began, and the host welcomed everyone to the Expo reception party. He invited All Might to the stage, and the audience applauded. All Might expressed his gratitude for the warm welcome, But before he could continue, an emergency message interrupted him. The security system announced a bomb threat in the Expo area, putting Island on high alert. Security bots were deployed, and the announcement urged residents and tourists to return to their homes or evacuation centers, warning that anyone who did not comply would face arrest. Suddenly, armed intruders entered the party room, asserting their control over the situation. They warned the heroes not to resist, threatening to unleash the security robots on the civilians. As devices emerged from the floor to restrain the heroes, All Might attempted to break free, but the intruder shot at the ceiling, commanding everyone to remain still. Wolfram declared that if they continued trying, he would eliminate them all. He then forcefully pushed All Might to the ground and instructed everyone to follow All Might's example and obey his orders. In the lobby, Shoto expressed his frustration about his phone having no signal. Jiro pointed out that the elevator was out of service, while Izumi noted that the remaining doors were closed. Melissa found the situation odd, suggesting that the security system wouldn't have switched to total lockdown just because of a bomb. Izumi insisted they needed to reach the party room, prompting Ida to question why. Izumi explained that All Might was there, which reassured Shiro that there was nothing to worry about. Izumi then turned to Melissa, asking if she knew a way to the party room. Melissa suggested they might be able to use the emergency stairs. Meanwhile, outside the bathroom stalls, Izuku and Jitsuno waited. Izuku asked if Vlad was done, to which Vlad replied he would be just a moment. He then kicked the door open, exited his stall, and went to wash his hands. Jitsuno remarked on how they had just arrived and Vlad was already in the bathroom. Vlad shrugged, acknowledging the situation. Izuku urged him to hurry, reminding him they were in the middle of an emergency. Vlad assured them he was aware and quickly finished washing his hands. He announced he was ready, asking if they were satisfied. Izuku confirmed he was, but Jitsuno lamented the long walk back. Izuku expressed disbelief that the nearest bathroom was not only 5 floors above the main room but also on the opposite side of the elevator. Vlad joked that he would do it just to mess with people, to which Izuku responded with an eye roll, knowing it was typical of Vlad.